Chapter 321. Please break the game. This type of ghastly tree originally belonged to the dark element. But now, the trees here looked even darker in color. Also, their size was much larger than ordinary ghastly trees. There was no one around Suzumo. He used Shadow Tyrant to cut the bark of a tree in front of him, and black resin flowed out. "Looks like it's mutated," Suzumo muttered. Ordinary ghastly trees weren't like this. Looking around, he saw that all the trees here were basically mutated. And it wasn't just the trees, even the bushes and plants beneath his feet had mutated. As he walked forward, he couldn't shake the feeling that the place was extremely eerie. It wasn't just the gloomy weather. It felt like countless eyes were watching him from the shadows. This silent extinction ridge was once just a dangerous place. Legend has it that after the battle where Grand Emperor Sandao bore the heaven's will, the resentment of all beings became too great, and all life here was cursed. Eventually, it became one of the forbidden grounds. Suzumo didn't really believe in that story. Although he had never visited the silent extinction ridge in his previous life, he knew about it from documents and rumors. Some time ago, he used the primordial chaos bead to traverse the river of fate to watch the evolution of the silent extinction ridge. Some of what he saw surprised him, so he had prepared for this moment. What he needed to be cautious about were the small details. Walking through the gloomy forest, all the surrounding trees looked the same. After walking for most of the day, Suzumo realized he still hadn't left the forest. And he had the illusion that he was walking in circles. There was a mysterious power suppressing the sky above, making it difficult for cultivators to fly. Continuing forward, Suzumo found a large clearing ahead. In the center of the clearing was a stone table. A man in black robes sat on the stone bench beside it. As Suzumo approached, he saw a chessboard on the table. The black-robed man was thin and bony. His whole body was just skin and bones with lifeless eyes, like a walking corpse. His frail body was wrapped in a large black robe. Seeing Suzumo arrive, the black-robed man slowly adjusted the pieces on the chessboard. A hoarse, aged voice came from his mouth. "Beat me on the board, and you may leave." "What if I lose?" Suzumo asked. "You'll become like him," the black-robed man said, pointing to a piece on the board. "Interesting." Suzumo smiled and sat down on the stone bench across the table. He looked at the chessboard. The chessboard appeared empty, but there were countless scenes and images hidden inside. It seemed like a whole world was contained within it. When Suzumo looked again carefully, the chessboard suddenly returned to normal. "Are you ready?" the black-robed man asked calmly. "Shouldn't you tell me the rules first?" Suzumo asked. This chessboard was unlike anything he knew. There were many things he didn't understand. "You'll understand once you're inside." The black-robed man waved his right hand, and endless dark energy surged out. Suzumo's vision changed. When he regained his senses, he found himself standing in a vast starry sky. "Close your eyes and you will understand," the black-robed man said softly. Suzumo smiled and closed his eyes slowly. At that moment, his spiritual perception became extremely clear. Inside this chessboard was a world of its own. And the layout of this world was modeled after the primordial heartlands. Many of its places looked identical to those in the primordial heartlands. But it was different from Suzumo's true fate world. This world was illusory. Nothing truly existed here. When Suzumo opened his eyes again, he already understood the situation. The world within this chessboard was designed based on the primordial heartlands. But it was incomplete in many parts. He was standing above the starry sky with the heavens above. At this moment, the heavens were in turmoil. A vortex had appeared at its center. The vortex was boundless, spreading across the entire sky. And at the source of the vortex, something seemed to be forming. "The heavens will," Suzumo said with widened eyes, breathing heavily. "No, it's also an illusion." The heavens' will was taking shape, and below it, countless people were rushing toward it in competition. Suzumo couldn't see their faces clearly. They seemed covered in mist. There was no bloodshed, no overwhelming aura. When those fighting died, their bodies simply disappeared. The only one that caught Su Zimo's attention was the person standing at the very front, carrying 3 swords on his back. He stood closest to the Heaven's Will, suppressing all others. When the 3 swords were unsheathed, no one around could withstand even one move. At that moment, the man stood above the universe, unstoppable and towering, a majestic presence throughout the ages. Even though he couldn't see the man's face, Su Zimo was sure this was Grand Emperor Sandao. The scene before him was the moment the Grand Emperor Sandao bore the Heaven's Will. But much was left out in this scene. It couldn't show the bloody cruelty of that time. Su Zimo turned his head and looked at the black-robed man. This world reminded him of someone. Someone ancient or someone who should have died long ago. Seeing Su Zimo's gaze, the black-robed man was silent for a long time before finally saying, "Please break the game." As his words fell, the scene in the sky changed instantly. All the people competing for the Heaven's Will disappeared. Only 2 people remained beneath the vortex. One stood above carrying 3 swords. The other stood below, wearing a star-patterned robe. Their faces couldn't be seen. They were like chess pieces frozen in place. "You remind me of someone," Su Zimo said. "The ancient star god, right?" Su Zimo said. Hearing that, the black-robed man slowly raised his head. He looked at Su Zimo in silence for a while before finally saying again, "Please break the game." The ancient star god, a legend from the same era as the Grand Emperor Sandao. Back then, he may have been very famous. But after several eras passed and everything settled, many ancient powerful names were forgotten in the silence of time. Su Zimo only learned of him when researching the Silent Extinction Ridge. After all, people always remember the final victor. Back then, the ancient star god entered Silent Extinction Ridge to fight for the Heaven's Will and never returned. He was the most unique among all who tried to claim the Heaven's Will. All because of the ancient star realm he cultivated. Chapter 322 Seeking the Baleful Miasma. As a powerful figure from the era of Grand Emperor Sandao, the ancient star god was undoubtedly exceptionally gifted. He possessed one of the 100 battle physiques, the Heaven Derivation Ancient Realm Physique. This physique formed a world of its own. Along with the complementary cultivation technique, the Star Realm Codex, he could record everything he saw and heard in an illusory form within the ancient realm. Although it was illusionary, it often closely mirrored reality. Eventually, by analyzing these illusionary recordings, he could deduce the real answers he sought. Ever since he developed this ability, he spent his life preparing to deduce the bearer of the Heaven's Will. He recorded as many real-world factors and opponents as he could into his ancient realm in illusionary form, then used all kinds of methods to simulate and deduce who was most likely to bear the Heaven's Will. Under what conditions could he maximize his own chances of claiming it? "Please break the game." The black-robed man in the outside world looked at Su Zimo and repeated. Su Zimo looked up at the sky and said softly, "You still can't let it go, can you?" The black-robed man's pupils contracted, and he stood in silence for a long time. Break what game? How to break it? This was essentially a question with no answer. The 2 figures in the sky, one was Grand Emperor Sandao, and the other was the ancient star god. Breaking the game meant helping the ancient star god simulate a path to bear the Heaven's Will. But that was something impossible. You say break the game, but really, you just want an answer, don't you? Su Zimo replied. The black-robed man, who had been silent all along, slowly let out a sigh. He waved his right hand, and the dark energy dispersed. Su Zimo's vision shifted, and when he opened his eyes again, he was back sitting at the stone bench by the chessboard. "Is there really no chance at all?" The black-robed man sighed. "Very little unless the one is me," Su Zimo said. "Why?" "No reason. Just because my name is Su Zimo." "You're right. It's been several centuries, and I still can't let it go. All just to answer the question that's never had an answer," the black-robed man said slowly. As he spoke, he took off the black hood over his head. "Just as you guessed, ancient star god. Didn't expect anyone would still remember me after all this time. Ancient star god. That's what everyone calls me. Even I've forgotten my real name. Su Zimo looked up at the man. It was indeed the ancient star god. Although he had never seen him before, the man before him clearly had lost his former glory. His eyes were sunken. His face was covered in deep lines, his gaze lifeless, and his body was little more than skin and bones. You came to Silent Extinction Ridge to look for treasure too? The ancient star god asked with a smile. Yes and no, Su Zimo replied with a smile. So many years have passed. Talk with an old, fading soul like me for a while, the ancient star god said. Before I go, I can give you some information about a treasure. What do you want to talk about? Su Zimo asked. Let me tell you about my unwilling past. Even after so many eras, I still can't truly let go. Go ahead, Su Zimo replied with interest. He was considered a rogue cultivator. Many people speculated about the ancient star god's origins. Some said he might have come from one of the mysterious 100 races, the star god race. That era was filled with turbulent changes. Called by the heaven's will, the ancient star god, like many other proud geniuses, just like how Grand Emperor Sandao once walked the flower-covered avenue and bid farewell to the true martial sacred ground, he too set foot on the path to Silent Extinction Ridge, the path toward heaven, a road of no return. Before that, he was full of confidence. He had run countless simulations in the ancient realm and believed he was perfectly prepared. He thought this journey to claim the heaven's will would be certain. The ancient star god sighed as he spoke, his gaze distant as he looked at Su Zimo. He seemed lost in memories of his regrets and helplessness. His eyes were sharp and bottomless. I knew fighting for the heaven's will would be dangerous and difficult, but I didn't expect it to be that difficult. When the winds of fate stirred and the battle began, I realized all my perfect preparations meant nothing. I can't forget that day. So many powerful beings, revered by the world, each one a living legend. Any one of them would have shaken the world. Yet they were all slaughtered by that man with the 3 swords. Grand Emperor Sandao? Su Zimo asked. You know, all the answers I spent my life deducing couldn't match a single strike from his sword, the ancient star god said with a sad smile. Blood soaked the whole Silent Extinction Ridge. The ground you're standing on was once covered in corpses and rivers of blood. Su Zimo stayed silent for a moment. The war for the heavens will truly was tragic. Just as the ancient star god said, he had spent his entire life simulating outcomes, only to be defeated by a single strike. Even now, he couldn't let it go. He wanted to find, through deduction, the answer to how he could have defeated Grand Emperor Sandao. What's your current state? Su Zimo asked. Though the ancient star god had awareness and could move, he seemed no different from a living person, but Su Zimo could tell he had no life force at all. I died in the great battle thousands of years ago, the ancient star god said with a calm smile. But my obsession was too strong. Under the dark decay of this Silent Extinction Ridge, I awoke again. I won't last much longer before I turn to dust. You were born in the wrong era, Su Zimo said. No, that era was magnificent. The ancient star god smiled. He looked down at the chessboard on the stone table, paused, then said, To be able to express what's in my heart before I vanish feels good. What treasure are you looking for? I know this place well. Maybe I can help. Baleful miasma, Su Zimo said word by word. How do you know about that? The ancient star god was slightly stunned. He looked at Su Zimo in surprise and asked, Are you from the true martial sacred sect? Or did you learn about it from Sandao's records? That's not important, Su Zimo replied. This thing isn't something you should touch, the ancient star god said. Even Sandao couldn't deal with it. He had to seal it away and use the power of light to slowly wear down that foul energy. If you haven't tried, how would you know? Su Zimo smiled. It's sealed in the center of Silent Extinction Ridge, the ancient star god said after a pause. Keep heading north. If you survive, you'll get there. Wish me luck. Su Zimo smiled and stood up. Good luck? The ancient star god said softly. lowering his head slightly and mouthing the words silently as he watched Su Zimo walk away. Chapter 323, The Man on the Throne. After saying goodbye to the ancient star god, Su Zimo walked straight north. After walking for a long time, he finally saw the exit of the ghastly tree forest in the distance. He let out a light breath. After walking through the seemingly endless forest of identical trees, it was hard not to feel suffocated. Fortunately, he hadn't been attacked along the way. It seemed the forest belonged to the ancient star god, and no creatures dared to enter it. After walking for a while longer, Su Zimo finally emerged from the forest. His vision suddenly widened. Looking straight ahead, Su Zimo saw a plain beyond the forest. But this plain was filled with mounds of various sizes. The mounds looked more like burial mounds. In front of many of the mounds were planted locust and cypress trees. Light rain began falling from the sky. Strangely, the rain only fell on the plain. Once one stepped into the forest, it would stop again. The atmosphere was very eerie. A light breeze blew by, and the locust trees in the distance swayed their branches, as if they were ghosts or demons clawing and reaching out. A piece of yellowed, tattered cloth floated through the air with the wind. Compared to true terror, what is this really? Su Zimo chuckled, stepped onto the plain, and slowly walked in. He had only walked a few steps when the earth under the mounds began to shift. Skeletons began crawling out from beneath the ground. These skeletons were roughly human-sized, with hollow blue flames burning in their eyes. The plain stretched endlessly, and the mounds were countless. As more skeletons climbed out, it became an army of bones. More terrifying still, all of these tens of thousands of skeletons were at the Imperial Meridian Realm. Some even had the aura of the Empyrean Meridian Realm. Such a formation would make many people tremble at a glance. The skeleton army growled and all charged toward Su Zimo. Looks like I can't avoid a big fight. Su Zimo slowly drew Shadow Tyrant, laughing wildly as he charged alone into the skeleton army. It was the spirit of charging ahead even against thousands. He swung Shadow Tyrant, and the power of creation fused with heavenly lightning, earth fire, floodwaters, and gales, all surging around him. With each swing of his blade, the spiritual energy burst like a tidal wave, unstoppable. At the same time, he used the 19 forms of Dao-seeking. These forms were a chained sequence. First form, Dawn's Light. Second form, Drifting on Green Duckweed. Third form, 100 Battles Never Broken. Fourth form, Rising Against the Current. Fifth form, Windstorm Rises. Sixth form, Blade of Slaughter. Seventh form, Draconic Storm. Eighth form, Deep Blue World. Ninth form, Celestial Rift. 10th form, Death Canopy. 11th form, Heaven Blood. 12th form, Void Oblivion. As these 12 forms connected in succession, the skies above filled with lightning and thunder. Though the skeleton army was massive in number, they had no consciousness and could only attack mechanically. With each swing from Su Zimo, several skeletons shattered. The skeletons surged forward fearlessly. Su Zimo kept slaughtering relentlessly, equally unyielding. Fighting was also a form of cultivation. It strengthened his combat experience, refined his use of meridian techniques, and brought insights. Shadow Tyrant rang lightly, and the sound of spiritual energy exploding echoed in his ears. The space around him shattered completely. Su Zimo was surrounded tightly by the skeleton army. He was like a death god, eyes bloodshot as he carved out a path through the bones. Every step forward was marked by several skeletons falling. The rain kept falling steadily. He thrust Shadow Tyrant into the mud at his feet, held the hilt with his right hand, and half knelt on the ground. His whole body trembled slightly, breathing heavily. Sweat poured down his forehead in large beads. It had been a long time since he'd been this exhausted, and a long time since he'd fought so freely. Behind him lay a field of broken bones. It was as if heaven and earth were playing a requiem for the dead. He slowly looked forward. There stood a grave marked by a stone stele. There were no inscriptions, a nameless tomb. At that moment, the ground beneath him began to shake. Cracks spread from all directions. Explosions rumbled beneath the grave. A massive throne rose from underground, hovering in the air. The throne slowly rotated toward him. Sitting on it was a headless corpse. Wild laughter erupted from the corpse. It had no head, yet somehow laughter rang out. The corpse looked long dead. Yet it was perfectly preserved, wearing a deep purple robe. The robe was embroidered with golden dragons. What caught Su Zimo's eye was the sword the corpse held. "Grand Emperor, true treasure," Su Zimo said with narrowed eyes. The sword was deep blue, 3 feet long. On its blade were several slots carved with different patterns. A river, a giant beast, and a human. It seemed to be telling a story. The laughter continued as the headless corpse slowly stood up from the throne. Its purple robe fluttered, and a vast imperial might radiated from the sword in its hand. Even more concerning was the aura of the God Meridian realm surging around it. The pressure grew stronger and stronger, shaking the entire sky. "I am the godchild of the Grand River God sect. The heavens' will should have been mine. How could insects like you compete with me? How could you possibly compete?" An angry roar full of unwillingness echoed across the sky. The headless corpse stepped down from the throne, its aura growing stronger. Step by step, it walked toward Su Zimo, kept muttering under its breath. "Insects, insects, all should die." It raised the Grand River sword in its hand, and with the full power of the Peak God Meridian realm, slashed at Su Zimo. With a loud boom, Su Zimo narrowly dodged the strike. Where he had just stood, a mighty river surged, reflecting all creation under the setting sun. The entire land was smashed down. "Insect, stop dodging," the headless corpse said, dragging the Grand River sword behind it. The tip of the sword scratched along the ground as it rushed toward Su Zimo. The dragging blade drew a half circle, then suddenly lifted high, like a blazing sun rising, slamming into Su Zimo with unstoppable force. This time Su Zimo didn't dodge. He slowly raised Shadow Tyrant and unleashed one move, Void Oblivion. Their attacks collided in midair. Su Zimo was sent flying backward. He quickly stood up, stretched his numb right arm, and laughed lightly. Sure enough, clashing head-on with a God Meridian expert is still a bit too much. But that's what makes it exciting. Chapter 324, Fragment of the True God Sword. Su Zimo immediately used the War God's 7th transformation, Azure Dragon, and in that moment, his aura surged. Behind him, the cyan yellow dragon seemed to come alive, roaring up at the sky. When the dragon opened its eyes, the aura around Su Zimo exploded several times stronger. "Void Oblivion," he shouted. Shadow Tyrant slashed down from above, wrapped in endless annihilation energy. The surrounding space shattered completely. This strike descended with world-destroying force. The headless corpse didn't care. It swung the Grand River sword and met the blade head-on. As the sword was swung, the sound of rushing water faintly echoed. It was as if heaven and earth were split by a wave of deep blue. A massive explosion rang out. Sword and blade clashed and separated. The headless corpse stood unmoving. Su Zimo, on the other hand, was pushed back several steps, his hand gripping Shadow Tyrant slightly numb. He clenched his fist and smiled. "Still not enough. Die, insect." The headless corpse didn't give him time to recover and charged again with its sword. 8th transformation, Blue Cloud. Su Zimo took a deep breath and began walking through the sky. The spirit force beneath his feet turned deep cyan. With every step, traces of that cyan aura were left in the air, like brushstrokes written in midair with a giant ink brush. The cyan energy carried a unique rhythm of the Grand Tao. As it gathered more and more in the sky, Su Zimo's aura intensified. The dragon behind him slowly faded, replaced by a staircase formed from condensed cyan energy. The stone steps extended upward, their end vanishing into the void, beyond sight. It looked like a stairway to the heavens. From the end of the steps, Waves of Grand Dao rhythm surged toward Su Zimo. At that moment, his aura reached a critical point. With a boom, a mushroom cloud exploded around him. An overwhelming force rippled through the heavens. Seeing the Grand River sword slashing toward him, Su Zimo laughed loudly. Perfect timing. He swung Shadow Tyrant with all his strength. This strike of void oblivion was unlike the previous ones. As Shadow Tyrant fell, the void within dozens of miles exploded. The headless corpse barely resisted before being completely obliterated by the blade's intent. The sword's momentum didn't stop. It slammed into the ground. Cracks spread across dozens of miles, and a bottomless crater appeared in front of Su Zimo. Looking around, Su Zimo confirmed the headless corpse had been reduced to dust. Not even a trace of the body remained. However, when it fell, something had dropped from it. Glancing around, a broken sword tip caught Su Zimo's attention. It was only the size of a thumb, with dark energy swirling around it. Su Zimo picked it up, and with just a gentle swipe, a cut appeared in his palm. A fragment of the true God sword, Su Zimo muttered with narrowed eyes. Blue Soul, why didn't you warn me earlier? He asked, taking out the sword spine of the true God's sword from his body. Blue Soul was the sword spirit he had saved from darkness before, and she had promised to help him gather the complete true God sword within 3 years. Master, I didn't sense it earlier, Blue Soul explained quickly. The dark energy around it blocked my perception. Su Zimo looked closely at the black aura swirling around the sword tip. After confirming she wasn't lying, he nodded. He then stored both the sword tip and the Grand River sword. Looking up, he saw the rain hadn't stopped. It was falling even heavier now, like a torrential downpour. The godchild of the Grand River God sect must have been one of the talents defeated by Grand Emperor Sandao.
Su Zimo Mumut.
The battle just now had been massive, the noise too loud. Before Su Zimo could leave, a figure came flying from the distance. It was a young man in white. His white hair was striking, tied back in a bun, and his white eyebrows stood out the most. His eyes carried a heroic aura, and a bright violet sword hung at his waist like a cluster of stars. As he approached, the aura of someone just entering the Imperial Meridian realm radiated around him. A true prodigy, comparable to those in the Middle Continent, Su Zimo thought to himself as he observed. The white-browed youth landed. The two looked at each other in silence. I am the current holy son of the supreme primal sacred ground. You may call me by my title, Primordius, the white-browed youth said with a friendly smile.
Su Zimo Nok Dexlai.
Looks like the battle just ended. Primordius smiled and said, Did you encounter anything, brother Primordius? Su Zimo asked. Just some ghosts and monsters, Primordius replied with a smile. Since you've dealt with it, I won't intrude. Farewell. As he watched Primordius leave, Su Zimo frowned slightly. This guy's talent was definitely top tier in the Eastern continent. And he had deep patience and cunning. He would surely become someone important in the future. After parting with Primordius, Su Zimo continued heading north. He had no intention of changing direction. After all, his goal in Silent Extinction Ridge was the baleful miasma. Everything else was just a bonus. The fragment of the true God sword had been unexpected. After leaving the plains, Su Zimo was surprised to see a desert bordering the area. A vast, barren desert with no signs of life. The rain grew heavier as it fell, yet the sand underfoot remained dry. He walked through the desert for a long time, occasionally hit by cold winds. The temperature dropped noticeably. Holy Sun Su, a startled voice suddenly called out. Su Zimo turned to look and saw a large boulder nearby. Beneath it, hollowed out, were 3 people hiding. He hadn't noticed them before. And you are? Su Zimo asked. He didn't recognize them. No time to explain. Hide! The yellow-robed youth whispered urgently. Su Zimo walked over curiously and ducked under the boulder. Just then, a loud explosion rang out nearby, followed by several blood-curdling screams. The screams were bone-chilling. Su Zimo poked his head out to look. Not far away, a withered corpse had grabbed two disciples. One was killed by having his neck snapped. The other was bitten clean through the neck. Chapter 325 Baleful Miasma Awakens. Su Zimo frowned slightly as he watched the scene. A God Meridian Realm aura radiated from the withered corpse. "What's going on?" he asked the three people next to him. "We don't know either," one of the yellow-robed disciples explained. "We came as a team. As soon as we entered the desert, we ran into these corpses. In the end, only the three of us survived. There are a lot of these corpses in the desert. They seem to patrol the area," another disciple added. "We can't get in or out. We're completely trapped." Su Zimo frowned in thought. These three were probably disciples of some second-rate sect. They likely recognized him from the earlier conflict with the Cloud Emperor sect. But what troubled him most was the sheer number of these corpses. If each one was at the God Meridian realm, he'd have to rely on Paimon and Chaos. With his current strength, he could deal with one God Meridian realm corpse, but many at once was out of the question. Su Zimo looked up. The desert stretched endlessly, empty and bare. There was nowhere to hide. This lone boulder was already a lucky find. If he kept going forward, there might be nowhere left to take cover if more corpses appeared. "Holy Sun Su, is there any way you can contact the sacred ground and have them get us out of here?" one of the youths asked hopefully.
No.
Even if the lineage sends someone, they'd only be at the Empyrean Meridian realm. It wouldn't help. Su Zimo shook his head. "Then we're doomed," the youth said in despair. "This is one of the 10 forbidden grounds," Su Zimo said, glancing at them. "You should have thought about that before coming in. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Stay hidden. I'm moving on." With that, he stood up and walked forward. That corpse from earlier had already disappeared, likely off patrolling. "Is he crazy?" one of the youths said, watching Su Zimo's back in shock. "If he runs into a corpse, he's dead for sure." As he walked through the desert, light rain fell from the sky. Su Zimo took a deep breath and quickened his pace. The atmosphere here weighed heavily on the heart. After a while, thick fog appeared ahead. It was impossible to see the road. Everything was hidden by mist. From within the fog, Su Zimo faintly heard painful roars. Then several figures slowly emerged. It was 3 withered corpses. 3 God Meridian realm corpses. Their appearances were impossible to distinguish, flesh and bone fused into a hardened shell. Their skin was covered in cracks. They opened their mouths and roared at Su Zimo. Sticky fluid dripped from their mouths, thick like some kind of molasses. As the 3 corpses charged at Su Zimo, they moved extremely fast, claws sharp and deadly. Su Zimo didn't dare underestimate them. He immediately summoned Chaos. The massive beast descended from the sky. It slapped the 3 corpses away with one paw. But the corpses had incredible defense. They were completely unharmed. They roared in anger and charged again. "Pointless fight," Su Zimo said calmly as he jumped onto Chaos's head. "Run toward the central area as fast as possible. Ignore the corpses." Chaos roared and spread 2 thin, blood-red wings that blocked out the sky. Even though flight was restricted here, Chaos's speed, combined with its wings, easily left the corpses behind. They entered the fog. Every now and then, Su Zimo could hear more howls as they ran. The mist blocked his vision, but he could sense it. There were a lot of corpses around. So many God Meridian realm corpses, if he tried to force his way through, he'd be torn apart. Chaos kept running forward. Su Zimo didn't bother to engage. Killing the corpses served no purpose. As the fog thinned, they neared its end. Just then, a black beam of light shot through the air. It hit Chaos in the back. With a loud boom, strange spirit force rippled out. A bloody hole opened in Chaos's back, and its massive body collapsed. Su Zimo looked up and saw 3 more corpses guarding the exit of the mist. These 3 were different from the others. They were surrounded by black gas. Black mist rose from their eye sockets. Even more terrifying, they exuded an immortal entry realm aura. "What the?" Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. Creatures in the immortal path were unexpected. In the era of those fighting for the heaven's will, the highest cultivation was only peak God Meridian realm. They were preparing to enter the path of Tao. None of them would have chosen the immortal path. Even if they died and became corpses, they shouldn't have immortal path strength. The path to immortality may not match the path of Tao, but it was still not easily reached. Many spent their whole lives stuck in the God Meridian realm, never progressing. Forget it. No point wasting time, Su Zimo muttered. He immediately summoned Paimon. Vast demonic energy surged around them. Paimon looked at the three corpses and said slowly, "My lord, I sense a wicked energy from them. I should have guessed." Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. "It seems the baleful miasma has awakened." Paimon said nothing more. He waved his hand. Massive demonic faces formed in the air, flying toward the corpses to devour them. The corpses resisted with all their strength. The demonic energy clashed and tangled with the wicked energy. Paimon frowned slightly. "What is this? Can suppress my demonic energy, even briefly. Good thing they're weak. If they were at my level, this would be difficult." With another wave of his hand, flames of demonic fire erupted from the devouring faces. The fire burned everything, leaving not a trace of the corpses. The first strand of mutated foul energy in the world. It was never going to be simple, Su Zimo said with a light laugh. What's ahead will be troublesome. A hard battle is coming. After killing the three corpses, Su Zimo withdrew chaos and let it recover in his true fate world. Thanks to the Tree of Life, injuries healed almost instantly. Of course, while the Tree of Life was powerful, able to create plant systems, help heal living beings, and even grant longevity. But it couldn't grant true immortality or resurrect the dead. Chapter 326, Obtaining the Immortal Suppression Chain. At this moment inside the True Fate world, the sword tip Su Zimo had previously acquired was suspended in midair. It had been corrupted by evil energy and was now unusable. But Su Zimo wasn't worried. When it came to purification, few things in the world could surpass the pure moon altar in his True Fate world. The subaltar he had obtained from the Myriad Beast sect had, under the enhancement of the True Fate world, grown to nearly match the main altar in power. He placed the sword tip of the True God sword into the altar for purification, then left it alone. Su Zimo and Paimon continued walking forward. They were nearing the end of the mist and had encountered no more corpse attacks along the way. Finally, the two stepped out of the mist, and the sight before them stunned Su Zimo. It was a mountain, not a small one. From its peak all the way down, the mountain was covered in countless bones. The bones surrounded all four sides of the mountain. There were tens of thousands, impossible to count. The scene was truly shocking, as bones stretched from the mountaintop all the way to the foot of the mountain, spanning hundreds of miles. These bones had been eroded by time over countless years. Some had become so fragile that Su Zimo's lightest step would crush them to pieces. Some had completely dried out, and when the wind blew, they scattered into the air like dust. The bones varied in color. Most were white, but there were also golden, purple, and black ones. The bones came in many sizes, from just a few dozen centimeters long to towering skeletons over a kilometer tall. Every type of creature imaginable was represented here. These remains had slumbered in this land for millions of years, undisturbed. They had merged with death and silence. The sea of bones seemed to cry out the tragedy of the battle that once took place here. Along with the bones were weapons that had once accompanied these warriors. Various weapons and treasures lay scattered across the land. Some were even Grand Emperor true treasures. Truly a tragic sight, Su Zimo said as he stepped onto the bone-covered ground. This is nothing? Paimon paused for a moment and said, My lord, the war we fought back then was far more brutal than this. Su Zimo didn't respond. He stepped across the bones, making his way toward the mountaintop. Though brutal, he had to admit, these bones were the witness to the glory of the time when Grand Emperor Sandao bore the heaven's will. There were many weapons at his feet, but Su Zimo didn't bother picking them up. Most had long lost their spirit force due to time. Halfway up the mountain, something caught Su Zimo's eye. It was a chain. This chain was a Grand Emperor true treasure. A bit unbelievable, but Su Zimo had heard of this chain before. The Immortal Suppression Chain. This was the weapon the Desolate Emperor once used to bear the heaven's will. Of course, the real Immortal Suppression Chain had ascended to the upper world with the Desolate Emperor. The Grand Emperor true treasures left behind at the imperial lineages today were merely replicas forged before their ascension. Legend has it that long ago, when the true martial sacred ground was the first to bear the heaven's will, at the very beginning of the imperial era, a god beast appeared in the world. Its name was the Horned Sheep. Back then, the world was filled with the misty aura of heaven and earth. The Horned Sheep fed on this aura. Later, as the aura faded, and there was nothing left for it to eat, the headstrong Horned Sheep chose to die by ramming into the desolate mountain. After it died, its body transformed into a chain. Later, a race called the Desolate Race appeared on Desolate Mountain. The chain that had once been the Horned Sheep became their sacred treasure. The Desolate Emperor came from this tribe. Even in his youth, he was recognized by this divine chain. The chain accompanied him as he grew stronger, and eventually became his life-bound divine weapon. It was later named the Immortal Suppression Chain. Su Zimo looked at the Grand Emperor true treasure in his hand, then at the bones beneath his feet. He figured this must have been a holy son of the Desolate Race who failed to bear the heaven's will and died. The chain in his hand was only 1 meter long, divided down the middle, half black, half white, like the balance of yin and yang. One side felt hot, the other cold. It was slightly heavy. Su Zimo knew this was just the chain's dormant form. Once activated, it could stretch endlessly. In a way, it could bind anything in the world. Of course, whether it could hold them or not depended on the strength of the bound target. Even the Immortal Suppression Chain had suffered damage after all these years in the Silent Extinction Ridge. Su Zimo placed it into the Pure Moon altar to be nurtured and restored. It should be fine. He stored the Immortal Suppression Chain away and continued climbing toward the mountaintop. At the summit, the wind swirled and strange rocks jutted out. The space was fairly large. A few trees grew in lonely isolation. A waterfall flowed down from the mountain's peak, with the force of a river dropping from the sky. At the summit, 2 figures were already waiting. They were Elder Tianjin and Luang. The ancestral item really worked, Luang said in awe. He looked at the light black robe draped over his body. This robe had been left behind by Grand Emperor Sandao. Anyone wearing it could merge with the silent aura of the Silent Extinction Ridge, concealed them from all sensing. This was how the two had arrived ahead of the others. Master, is this the sealing site? Luang asked curiously. He looked around but didn't see anything unusual. Elder Tianjin nodded and walked over to the few trees growing at the peak. He frowned slightly. The trees had already begun to wither. Their leaves had yellowed and would not last much longer. That's not right. With the formation here, the trees should be thriving, he murmured. Then he took out a talisman from his storage ring. The talisman was dark yellow, covered in strange symbols drawn in black ink. He slowly pressed the talisman against the tree trunk. Suddenly, a golden light shot up into the sky. The tree itself was just a vessel. The light pierced the clouds with a roar. Powerful spirit force dispersed the remaining mist and reached the far ends of the sky. At the mountaintop, 5 golden symbols began to emerge from the ground in the shape of a pentagram. Each symbol was different. Golden lines connected them, forming a star-shaped formation. In the center of the formation, a pitch-black cage slowly rose from the ground. This cage had been hidden in the void until now. Now it had finally emerged into the world. Chapter 327, The Scheme at the Beginning of the Era. The moment the black cage appeared, the sky was filled with surging annihilation energy. It wrapped tightly around the cage, as if something terrifying was sealed inside. Is this the sealed object? Luang asked curiously. Elder Tianjin didn't respond. He frowned slightly and walked up to the cage. Inside the cage, a cluster of black miasma lay quietly. The miasma looked weak. Luang circled the cage and said with a laugh, "This doesn't look so scary." "If only that were true," Elder Tianjin replied slowly. "Back then, even Grand Emperor Sandao couldn't destroy it. He could only seal it away. If it ever breaks free, the world could face a great catastrophe." As he spoke, Elder Tianjin took out a dark yellow stone. "Master, what is this?" Luang asked curiously. "It's the Fate Stone," Elder Tianjin explained. "Long ago, Grand Emperor Sandao left behind instructions. Every 10,000 years, the formation must be reinforced until the baleful miasma fully dissipates. He then took out 5 Fate Stones, placing them one by one at the glowing golden formation points in the shape of a 5-pointed star. The formation lit up brightly. The power from the Fate Stones was gradually absorbed into the cage. The 5-pointed star shone even more brilliantly. Seeing this, Elder Tianjin finally took a deep breath, visibly more relaxed. "Old man, I've waited nearly 1,000 years for you." Suddenly, a voice echoed from within the cage. The entire formation trembled. The annihilation energy on the cage, along with the power from the Fate Stones, was instantly absorbed into it. Elder Tianjin's expression changed drastically. He stepped back, startled. "You've awakened?"
Impossible.
"This can't be happening." "Nothing is impossible," the voice from within the cage replied. "I am the first miasma born of heaven and earth. As long as this world exists, I can never be destroyed. That boy Sandao underestimated me." As the voice fell, its momentum grew stronger. The 5 Fate Stones shattered instantly. With a loud boom, the cage exploded completely. The 5-pointed star formation cracked apart, and all the annihilation energy was consumed. It was replaced by a flood of dark, evil aura. The evil aura soared into the sky, covering half the heavens. Su Zimo had just reached halfway up the mountain. He looked up and saw the massive pillar of evil aura rising to the sky. Beside him, Paimon frowned slightly and said, "This is a major threat. It's already broken the seal. Be careful," Su Zimo warned. The anti-flight restrictions in the sky didn't affect Paimon. He carried Su Zimo into the air and flew straight toward the mountaintop. The evil aura surged down from above, engulfing Elder Tianjin and Luang before they could react. They were instantly knocked unconscious. This scene wasn't limited to the mountain. Everyone in the entire Silent Extinction Ridge saw it. The sky was covered in evil aura, like the end of the world. Some people tried to flee immediately, only to discover that the entire Silent Extinction Ridge had been sealed off by the evil aura. Even the entrance was nowhere to be found. At the mountaintop, a purple-black miasma rose into the air. Thunder cracked, and torrential rain stirred up giant waves. The evil aura laughed wildly. It was like it was venting after centuries of imprisonment. "To thank you for welcoming my return, I'll reward you all by making you my first nourishment." Its voice echoed through the Silent Extinction Ridge. Thunder rumbled across the sky in an uproar. The evil aura gathered and fell from the sky like meteor showers. Each cluster rained down with destructive force. Countless groups of evil aura descended at once, their impact overwhelming. Seeing this, Su Zimo frowned slightly and said, "It wants to destroy the entire Silent Extinction Ridge. Should we stop it?" Paimon asked. "No use. We have to deal with it directly." Su Zimo shook his head. Below, people scattered like headless ants trying to hide. "There are no grand emperors in this era. Who can stop me?" the evil aura shouted. Its voice fell, and the evil miasma came crashing down with thunderous force. "You go stall it. I need some time to prepare," Su Zimo said with a frown. Paimon nodded and flew toward the evil aura. Paimon couldn't destroy the baleful miasma entirely. It was tied to this world. Unless the world itself was destroyed, the miasma couldn't be killed. Besides, it wasn't always this evil. Only after a mutation did a malevolent consciousness form within it. Paimon soared into the sky, his demonic energy swirling. With a boom, his energy burst toward the heavens. In an instant, he broke through the evil aura's blockade, taking over half the sky. The evil aura clashed with the demonic aura. Two forces locked in fierce conflict. Who are you? The baleful miasma immediately sensed something was off. It stopped controlling the falling miasma and fixed its gaze on Paimon. When it saw him, it was visibly shocked. What are you? To be precise, I'm not a man. I'm a demon, Paimon said with a laugh. Demon? That name sounds familiar. The baleful miasma paused. It feels like, in a very ancient past, I heard that name. Hearing this, Paimon shook his head casually and said, Little one, what do you even know? Before this era ever existed, we already ruled supreme. The beginning of the era. Yes, that's it. The baleful miasma suddenly recalled. Someone once made a deal, targeting your ancient demon race. What do you know? Paimon said coldly. Your ancient demon race will fall. A scheme was laid long ago at the start of the era. The miasma laughed. The game hasn't even started. Who's to say who's a pawn and who's the player? Paimon replied calmly. What's a so-called beginning of the era? Since ancient times, we've always fought against fate. So you've come to stop me? The baleful miasma said coldly. What if I destroy you? Paimon replied casually. His demonic energy surged, forming into a massive spear. The spear tore through the void, thrusting toward the baleful miasma. With a thunderous boom, it exploded. The baleful miasma wasn't about to back down. Chapter 328 Pure Ionic Energy. The baleful miasma opened its monstrous, distorted face and swallowed the demonic spear whole. With a thunderous boom, the spear exploded inside, causing violent tremors, and the evil aura around it churned. Pointless. You can't kill me, the miasma sneered. Its surrounding evil aura surged, and behind it, a phantom began to form. The baleful miasma roared and fell from the sky, collapsing the space around it. Paimon frowned, and with a wave of his hand, dark energy spread around him. When the miasma landed, it collided with his aura. With a roar, the baleful miasma was flung backward, and Paimon took a few steps back, his expression growing serious. The miasma was unharmed, evil aura still rampant. Paimon leapt into the void, covering half the heavens with his demonic energy. At that moment, his true form appeared. It was a horned, black mist-enveloped creature holding a giant axe, Paimon's true fate beast. That's your true form, isn't it? The baleful miasma remarked calmly. Its aura grew ever stronger, but Paimon's energy flooded the sky. The creature towered over heaven and earth, its seven-fingered claws slicing through time and pressure. Space collapsed around its hand. It looked slow, but it moved across dimensions. The miasma didn't react in time before it was caught. Panicked, it howled, Heaven demon, we have no grudges. This is pointless. As long as the world isn't destroyed, I'm immortal. Let's cease this. You're not invincible, Paimon snorted. He grasped the miasma like a toy with one hand and aimed a darkfire punch at it. With an earth-shattering boom, the impact cracked the ground in every direction. The miasma's screams echoed, and when Paimon lifted his fist, the creature lay exhausted in a deep pit. He struck again with his true fate form, its aura nearly extinguished. The miasma was weak but still refractory. You don't even deserve me pulling out my axe, Paimon said coolly. You can't kill me. It whispered. Wait until I recover. None can stop me then. It threatened. You may not get that chance, Paimon responded, pinching it with two fingers. Nearby, Su Zimo sat cross-legged. His true fate world appeared above him, showing a blue planet with a small swirling vortex. Paimon tossed the baleful miasma into the vortex and stood guard beside Su Zimo. I can't be sealed, heaven demon. I will corrupt this world. The miasma howled as it tumbled through space. After moments of weightlessness, it landed in a vast new world and looked around in disbelief. Where is this? It gasped, then realized in horror. This was another world, separate from the primordial heartlands. Here it was immortal but powerless. Trapped, possibly for ages, it roared in anger. You ancient demons plotted this huge scheme. Once I'm free, I'll expose you to the heavenly Tao. Before the end of this era, if the heavenly Tao discovers that another world exists, they'll destroy Su Zimo's true fate world. You may never have that chance. A voice boomed from above. Welcome to the God world. The baleful miasma looked up and saw Su Zimo standing in the sky, purple-robed, smiling gently. The sky roiled, and clouds swirled in a fierce wind. Blue sky and white clouds intertwined. The air charged. Su Zimo was surrounded by spiritual energy, as if forming a formation. Master of this world, are you? The miasma whispered. Do you really think you can leave alive? Su Zimo descended and asked with a smile. You can seal me forever, but if I ever escape, you'll see what happens. The miasma retorted. Why seal you? You misunderstand. Su Zimo shook his head. Killing you outright would have been simpler. I am immortal, the miasma replied. You think nothing can solve you? There is, Su Zimo said, revealing a purple box. It looked ancient. Upon opening it, the miasma trembled.
Impossible.
How did you find this? Technically, I didn't find it, but that doesn't matter. Su Zimo opened the box to reveal a single petal. It was blood-red, vivid like fresh blood. Chapter 329, Heavenly Tribulation God Eyes. In fact, the blood was just the petal's own way of hiding itself. Su Zimo slowly waved his right hand, and as the spirit force surged in his palm, the blood on the surface of the petal began to be gradually absorbed. Once the blood was fully absorbed, the petal underwent a dramatic change. Its surface became transparent, appearing extremely clear. This clarity and purity was the most pristine thing Su Zimo had ever seen. It was crystal clear, as if completely free from any speck of dirt. Far more sacred than even the lotus that emerges unstained from mud. Still recognize this? Su Zimo asked with a smile. The moment the baleful miasma saw the transparent petal, it began retreating desperately. Tried to escape with all its might, but Su Zimo blocked it. Not even saying hello when meeting an old friend? That's really disappointing, Su Zimo said with a laugh. Pure Ionic Energy. What a beautiful name. What do you want to do? The baleful miasma shouted in terror. Use you to forge something, Su Zimo replied flatly. Then he slowly took out the petal. With the continuous infusion of spirit force, the petal completely dispersed. A wisp of pure Ionic energy flew out from within the petal. Under Su Zimo's control, the pure Ionic energy slowly merged with the baleful miasma. No matter how hard the baleful miasma resisted, it was of no use. The moment the pure Ionic energy touched the baleful miasma, a loud rumble came from within. Crackling explosions echoed as the two began to merge and condense. One clear, one turbid. As the two masses of energy rose into the air, the skies above changed dramatically. It was as if time had returned to the beginning of the era, to the moment of creation. The pure Ionic energy rose to become the sky, and the baleful miasma sank to form the earth. Heaven and earth governed all, and within the vast grand Tao, the existence of heavenly tribulation emerged. The two masses of energy before Su Zimo were the first wisp of pure Ionic energy and the first wisp of baleful miasma from the dawn of the era. The pure Ionic energy in the purple box wasn't something Su Zimo had found himself. The purple box was the one he had asked for from Qi Qianxue at the Qi Imperial clan. The pure Ionic energy inside was sealed there by Grand Emperor Bing Shui long ago. The origin of the matter dates back to the era of Grand Emperor Sandao. Few knew that in his youth, Grand Emperor Sandao was once the Tao companion of the Grand Emperor Bing Shui. Later, during his destined time in the Silent Extinction Ridge, he discovered the baleful miasma. The reason the Silent Extinction Ridge changed from a danger zone to a forbidden ground wasn't solely because of his many killings, it was also because of the baleful miasma. Knowing he couldn't fully destroy the baleful miasma, Grand Emperor Sandao sealed it. He hoped that over endless time, this evil energy would slowly dissipate. At the same time, he began searching for the pure ionic energy. Unfortunately, even up to the moment before his ascension, he still hadn't found it. Later, he used supreme techniques to help his Tao companion, Grand Emperor Bing Shui, to reincarnate and rebuild her cultivation. After his ascension, the next generation Grand Emperor Bing Shui took on the heaven's will of that era. She eventually found the pure ionic energy. But unfortunately, by then the baleful miasma had grown too strong. Even while sealed, it couldn't be easily destroyed. It could absorb the baleful miasma of the era itself to fight back, making it impossible for the Grand Emperor Bing Shui to use the pure ionic energy to purify it. In the end, she had no choice but to seal the pure ionic energy within the purple box, hoping that in the hands of future generations, after the baleful miasma had weakened over centuries of erosion, the pure ionic energy could finally purify it in one stroke. But of course, unexpected things happened. Over hundreds of thousands of years, not only did the baleful miasma fail to weaken, it grew even stronger. Eventually, it broke free of its seal. Su Zimo had no choice but to place it within his true fate world. This severed its connection to the primordial heartlands, preventing it from absorbing more era baleful miasma to recover. This was a last resort. Under normal circumstances, Su Zimo would never allow an unknown life form to enter his true fate world. The risk of exposure would be far too great. At this moment, high above, the clear and baleful miasma had fully merged. One clear, one turbid. Within the merged energies, strange phenomena began to appear, countless scenes swirling within. Sometimes violent storms, where demonic forms created by baleful miasma rampaged through hellish landscapes. Other times, clear skies, where the rising pure ionic energy brightened the entire world, making everything seem hopeful. These images kept shifting. Su Zimo sat cross-legged. He had gone through all this trouble not out of goodwill to eliminate the baleful miasma. In a previous life, he had once come across a combat technique from the legendary era, Heavenly Tribulation God Eyes, a battle technique involving the eyes. Once mastered, the eyes could become instruments of divine punishment. In battle, they could unleash divine wrath unexpectedly and with immense power. However, cultivating this technique required the fusion of ionic energy and baleful miasma. And the more powerful the energy, the stronger the God Eyes. In his past life, he never had the chance, and the technique was left to gather dust. In this life, ever since he and Little Gui saw Silent Extinction Ridge in the Grand Myriad Mountains, Su Zimo had been planning for this. And now, he was using the very first wisp of clear and baleful miasma from the beginning of the era. Now sitting cross-legged, with the two merged energies above him, Su Zimo prepared for the final step. The eyes are among the most fragile parts of the human body, but also among the most important. There was no room for error. He first used the power of creation to slowly open the meridians around his eyes. Each meridian caused excruciating pain as it was opened. Even blood began to trickle out. Once all the necessary meridians were cleared, Su Zimo waved his hands. The merged ionic energy and baleful miasma instantly flew toward him. Fusing the energies was just one crucial step in cultivating the God Eyes. As the energies entered his eyes, Su Zimo felt a cooling sensation spread through his brain. Like spring water during the sweltering heat, all the pain vanished. Then, from his storage ring, Su Zimo took out the other required materials. 9 Heavens Thunderstone, Thunder Dragon Fruit, 1,000 Illusion Lightning Flower, Blood Spirit Grass. A long list of countless materials was taken out. As he slowly absorbed the power from these materials, he channeled all that power into his eyes, refining them little by little. The process was long and incredibly painful. Even the slightest mistake could result in blindness. Meanwhile, outside, the apocalyptic scene began to fade. Although the Silent Extinction Ridge was partially torn apart, the baleful miasma in the sky began to slowly dissipate. Many people looked up at the sky. Chapter 330, Holy River Village. They didn't know what had just happened. It seemed like there were creatures fighting within the rolling black mist earlier. No one knew the final outcome, but the force it caused had everyone terrified. The evil aura sealing off Silent Extinction Ridge had completely dissipated. The entrance they came through had reappeared. After experiencing such an event, most people had lost the desire to search for treasures. Life comes first. No one could guarantee that another battle wouldn't break out at any moment. And as one of the 10 forbidden grounds, Silent Extinction Ridge was truly dangerous enough to make many hot-headed people fear it. People began to withdraw from Silent Extinction Ridge one after another. The Silent Extinction Ridge never stayed in one place permanently. It mostly remained hidden in the infinite void, and only occasionally paused in the outside world before quickly vanishing again. Now, as more and more people exited Silent Extinction Ridge, the vast land began to tremble. Countless sonic booms echoed around. Boom, boom, boom. Even the sky started to shatter, and Silent Extinction Ridge transformed into a streak of black light, vanishing into the infinite void at high speed. After Silent Extinction Ridge departed, the people waiting at Bluestone Valley had mixed reactions. Some had found treasures within Silent Extinction Ridge. Some lineages and sects suffered heavy losses. But all of this had little to do with Suzimo, who was still cultivating inside. As Silent Extinction Ridge flew away, Paimon glanced at Suzimo, who was still immersed in cultivation. Then, demonic energy surged around him. The demonic energy lifted Suzimo's body and slowly carried him toward the outside world. Silent Extinction Ridge moved through the void. Paimon directly broke through the void barrier, taking Suzimo away from there. Paimon looked around, waved his hands, and chopped down several large trees nearby. He built a wooden raft. Placing Suzimo on the raft, he let it float along the calm river current. Then he hid in the void, secretly protecting him. The midday sunlight filtered through the layers of mountain forest, cast a faint glow on the shimmering river surface. The wooden raft floated lightly on the water. The river was calm and long. Suzimo drifted along with it. Within his true fate world, he was still slowly refining his eyes. Downstream, there was a mortal village built along the river. They had lived by the river for generations, for hundreds of years. Holy River Village. As dawn broke, a few willow trees at the village entrance swayed in the cool autumn breeze. A group of women carried wooden basins and a large pile of clothes, coming early to the lower part of the river to wash laundry. The river water was clear, and the riverbed stones were as large as prehistoric eggs. Among these women were 3 older women and 2 younger girls. The 5 of them stood in place, chatting idly as they washed clothes. Gumuyu, I heard your mother promised you to Xiao Xing from the east side of the village. Why don't you want to marry him? His father is the village chief, and he's good-looking too. You'd definitely live a good life with him, one of the women said, looking at the girl beside her. Exactly, a lot of girls in the village want to marry Xiao Xing. He chose you and you still don't want it. You really should take the opportunity, another woman added. The girl named Gumuyu just smiled and shook her head. She didn't respond. She wore a light blue robe, looking very delicate and pretty. Her long hair was tied with a pink ribbon, and her eyes were bright and clear. When she smiled, there was a small dimple on her left cheek. Very lovely. At the moment, she just kept washing clothes silently. As the sky gradually brightened, the women finished washing and were getting ready to leave. Suddenly someone pointed into the distance and shouted, "Look, what's that over there?" "Looks like a small wooden raft," one of the women replied. "There's someone lying on it. We haven't seen a stranger in Holy River Village in ages, right? We're tucked deep in the forest." As the women chatted curiously, the raft slowly floated over. The wooden raft reached the shore and was pulled in by a few of the women. They looked at the young man on the raft and called out to him, but he didn't respond. Could he be dead? One woman guessed. The girl named Gumuyu placed her hand near the young man's nose, checked, and shook her head. He's not dead. His breathing is normal. Then why hasn't he woken up? The woman shook her head and said, "Forget it. Let him float away. No need to get involved in something troublesome." But there are often wild animals downstream. Sometimes even signs of demon beasts, Gumuyu said, unable to bear it. If he doesn't wake up, he might be eaten by them. What's that got to do with us? It's not like we harmed him, the woman replied indifferently. Let's go. He might be trouble. The women started to drag Gumuyu away. As the raft drifted farther, Gumuyu stayed silent for a moment. Then she broke free from their hands and ran toward the raft. She grabbed it by the shore and turned back to say, "No matter what, it's a life. Since we've seen it, we can't just ignore it. If you want to save him, do it yourself. Don't say your aunt didn't warn you," one woman replied. "If this guy turns out to be a bad person, it won't be worth the risk." "I'll take that risk," Gumuyu said after a pause, then pulled the young man off the raft. Half carrying, half dragging, she brought him back toward the village. The other women wanted to help but hesitated and finally gave up. Holy River Village, being a mortal village, was not wealthy, and Gumuyu's family was even poorer. Her home was at the edge of the village, just two shabby and simple thatched huts, and in the rainy season, many spots inside would leak. Aside from the huts, there was a small yard. The yard was made of red bricks, and a white-yellow ewe was raised nearby. She lived only with her 50-year-old blind mother. She had never seen her father since birth. Now, covered in sweat, Gumuyu worked hard to carry Suzimo into the house and lay him on her bed. She wiped the sweat from her forehead. She took a closer look at the young man in front of her. He wasn't especially handsome at first glance, but he had a kind of enduring appeal. "Little you, is that you?" A woman's voice came from the other hut. The blind woman stepped out, feeling the wall with her cane. "Mom," Gumuyu quickly answered, walking out of the room. "You haven't eaten yet, have you? I'll go cook now." Chapter 331. God Eyes Take Form. "You don't need to rush, child. Rest for a bit first," the woman said with a smile. "Mom, I'm fine." Gumuyu smiled back and went to the kitchen. It was a very old and shabby kitchen. She set the pot on the stove and lit a fire, cooking some thin porridge. When it was ready, she poured it into 3 bowls. One bowl she gave to her mother. The other she brought into her own room. She looked at the still unconscious young man. With one hand, she gently opened Suzimo's mouth, and with the other, carefully fed him spoon by spoon. At this moment, Suzimo could actually sense everything. He was aware of the situation outside. But the refinement of the heavenly tribulation God Eyes had reached a critical point. And if he truly encountered danger, Paimon would act immediately. Inside his true fate world, wind and thunder raged, and endless storms surged. In the northern part of the God world, the myriad beast race had already been fully established. The first batch of dragon cubs had made it through infancy and were slowly growing. After feeding the porridge, Gumuyu went to her mother's room to take back the bowl and clean it. "Little you," her mother sighed and said, "You've been taking care of me for so long. It's been hard on you. Taking care of one's own parents is only natural. It's not hard." Gumuyu shook her head and replied, "I'm just a burden. Sometimes I really feel like ending it all," her mother said sadly. "But I made a promise to someone that I would wait for him to come back, no matter how long." Gumuyu paused for a moment while picking up the dishes and said lightly, "You mean that man? He's not coming back. He never will." "Then I'll wait until I die," her mother replied. "He's your father. Don't hold so much resentment. I'm sure he had his reasons." "So I'm supposed to understand a father I've never even met?" Gumuyu asked in return. Then she left the room with the dishes. "You stubborn child," her mother sighed behind her. Life in Holy River Village was simple. Suzimo probably never expected that refining the heavenly tribulation God Eyes would take a full month. During that month, Gumuyu fed him every day. She would sit beside him each day and talk about her life. Anything and everything. Maybe she just finally had someone she could talk to. And maybe it helped that this someone was unconscious, so she could speak freely. Suzimo found himself amused, listening to the girl's stories. During the dull process of cultivating the god eyes, her small thoughts became like spices that made time pass a bit more easily. After 1 month in the True Fate world, the weather suddenly changed. Thunder roared. Su Zimo stepped into the sky. His eyes glowed gold. Spiritual energy exploded from his body, and every move carried great power. As he slowly opened his eyes, they shone with golden light, full of divine might and unpredictable changes. Inside his eyes, dark purple divine runes flowed. He looked toward the sea. A bolt of divine lightning shot out from his eyes. Boom! The lightning was incredibly fast, before anyone could react. It had already pierced through the void and struck the surface of the sea. With a deafening explosion, huge waves surged into the sky. The sea for 100 miles around became turbulent. Su Zimo took a deep breath, satisfied with the power of the god lightning. In fact, the attacks of the heavenly tribulation god eyes had 3 levels. What he just used was only the first 9 heavens god lightning. There were still the martial god thunder, and the final form true chaos tribulation. After the god eyes were fully formed, Su Zimo's eyes returned to normal. Only now they looked brighter and more captivating. Meanwhile, in the outside world, Gu Muyu still sat beside the bed, talking about her thoughts. "Your stories are quite nice," Su Zimo said. "Thanks," Gu Muyu replied instinctively. Then she suddenly realized something and shot up from her chair, taking a few steps back. You're awake." Su Zimo slowly opened his eyes and sat up from the bed. "What? Am I that scary?" he asked. No, Gu Muyu quickly shook her head. "It's good you're awake, really good." Su Zimo didn't say anything more and got off the bed, heading straight outside. "You just woke up. Do you want to rest a bit more?" Gu Muyu quickly asked from behind. Su Zimo shook his head and walked outside. It looked like there had been a light rain. The air was hazy. From the doorway, looking into the distance, the scenery outside was beautiful. Mountains and forests were shrouded in mist. It looked like a scene from a painting. But Gu Muyu's house was quite poor. As Su Zimo stepped out, Gu Muyu quickly followed. She looked a bit nervous and said, "My name is Gu Muyu. I'm Su Zimo." "Young Master Su? Just call me Brother Zimo." Su Zimo shook his head and said, "Zimo?" Gu Muyu hesitated, then finally clasped her hands together and spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Is it that hard to say?" Su Zimo smiled and asked. "No, it's just, I've never had any relatives other than my mother," Gu Muyu explained quickly.
Su Zimo smiled.
The girl was pure and kind, sometimes stubborn. He actually liked the peaceful life in Holy River Village. But only for a while. After some time, the warrior inside him would grow restless. "Are you hungry? I'll go make food." Gu Muyu suddenly remembered and said, "Noodles again?" Su Zimo smiled and asked. He'd had noodles almost every meal lately, rarely any vegetables, let alone meat. "That's all we have left. If you want, I can borrow some greens from my aunt," Gu Muyu replied. "No need. I'll take care of it." Su Zimo shook his head. He led Gu Muyu straight toward the edge of the village. "Where are we going?" Gu Muyu asked curiously. "Hunting. But the beasts in the forest outside are very strong," Gu Muyu quickly said. "Last time the village sent hunters out, several people were killed by wild animals. Don't worry, I've learned some sword techniques." As they talked, the two reached the forest outside the village. Tall trees and thick grass made it the perfect place for wild animals. Luckily, these were only untrained beasts. There was no sign of demon beasts. If there were, a mortal village like Holy River would be wiped out in an instant. Chapter 332, Assassins in the Night. In the forest, Su Zimo encountered many wild beasts. With a flick of his blade, Shadow Tyrant shot forward and instantly pierced the neck of a wild boar weighing over 100 kilos. The huge body of the boar was pinned directly to a tree. Blood flowed down the blade. Gu Muyu wasn't scared. She picked up a few stones from the ground and threw them at the wild boar. Only after confirming it was dead did she dare to walk closer. "Brother, you're amazing. You killed the wild boar with just one strike. Even better than Grandpa Shao in the village. Su Zimo smiled, pulled Shadow Tyrant out, slung the boar's body over his shoulder, and walked home. Is Grandpa Shao very strong? Hearing Su Zimo's question, Gu Muyu quickly nodded and said, very strong. That's why the village chose him to be the village chief. They say he once went to the nearby Tidewatch sect and served as an outer disciple. He learned some cultivation techniques and is now at the Spirit Meridian realm. He's the strongest person I've ever met. Oh wait, not stronger than you, brother. This girl was like a chatterbox, probably because she rarely had anyone her age to talk to. She talked about everything on the way and asked all kinds of questions. It was afternoon, and Holy River Village looked quite lively. Some villagers gathered at the entrance chatting, others were busy with their tasks. When they saw Su Zimo walking by with a huge wild boar on his back, everyone was stunned. The forest outside Holy River Village was full of wild, cunning beasts, and it was hard to catch them. Only a few strong young men, led by the village chief, were usually able to hunt them. Seeing such a big boar now, many couldn't believe their eyes. Muyu, where have you been? Someone in the village asked curiously. Hunting with my brother. Gu Muyu replied with a smile. Your brother? Since when do you have a brother? I never heard of that. Someone asked suspiciously. Just recognized him recently. I saved him by the river a few days ago. Gu Muyu replied cheerfully. You better be careful. There are a lot of bad people these days, someone warned. I know. Gu Muyu nodded and didn't take it to heart, chasing after Su Zimo. Back home, Gu Muyu looked very happy. She set up the pot and started boiling water, while Su Zimo took the time to process the wild boar. They worked until dusk, and the sky began to darken. They lit a bonfire in the yard. Half of the meat was grilled, and the other half was stewed in the pot. What they couldn't finish, they stored away. In a house at the east end of Holy River Village, the room was pitch black, as if a curtain of darkness had covered everything. Several figures merged with the shadows gathered inside. The boar's in the pot. Time to kill. No mistakes allowed. It must be done right. As the voice filled with killing intent faded, the room returned to silence. Su Zimo tore off a large piece of roasted meat and handed it to Gu Muyu. She ate it with great enjoyment. She also ladled some stew and meat soup from the pot and brought it to her mother inside the house. Little Yu, do we have guests? Her mother asked curiously. Where did this meat come from? Brother Zimo went hunting. Gu Muyu explained everything briefly. Then she helped her mother come out into the yard. Gu Muyu's mother thanked Su Zimo repeatedly, and Su Zimo just smiled without saying much. He glanced at her and frowned slightly. This woman wasn't an ordinary person. Judging by the spiritual energy in her body, she was at least in the Paragon Meridian realm. At that level, even with blindness and diminished combat ability, it shouldn't affect daily life much. But now her family was living in such poverty. This woman was hiding something. Though Su Zimo didn't know what it was, he wasn't interested in digging into her past. Everyone has their secrets, as long as they don't interfere with him. After dinner, Su Zimo didn't ask to sleep on the bed. After all, it was Gu Muyu's bed. He sat under a tree in the yard, preparing to meditate through the night. As night deepened, the temperature dropped significantly. Leaning on a tree branch, Su Zimo looked at the bright moon in the sky. Suddenly, his gaze shifted to a corner of the courtyard wall, and he smiled slightly. He got down from the tree and walked straight toward the river outside the village. Looks like he noticed us. A low voice spoke from the shadows. Follow him. The lake at night had a unique kind of beauty. Moonlight reflected on the water, and the river flowed gently. You've followed me for so long. Don't you plan to come out? Su Zimo asked with a smile, turning his head. So confident, aren't you? 3 shadows slowly emerged from the void. They were fully dressed in black, with cloaks and wide-brimmed hats. Confident about what? Su Zimo asked. You brought us out here because you're confident you can defeat us? Or because you picked a scenic place to die? One of them laughed. Do we know each other? Su Zimo asked. There are many reasons to kill someone. You don't need to know them. The man in the middle replied coldly. 3 cultivators in the Imperial Meridian realm. Where did you get the confidence to say that? Su Zimo said, shaking his head. Hearing that Su Zimo instantly saw through their cultivation, the 3 were startled. They took a step back and said, So, you're here for that thing, aren't you? Su Zimo frowned slightly. He really did arrive here by accident. But from what the black-cloaked man just said, there seemed to be more to the story. He waved his hand. Before the 3 black-cloaked men could react, they were struck from behind. They collapsed on the ground like puddles of mud, completely powerless. Their expressions changed drastically. They had been ambushed and hadn't sensed a thing. Su Zimo waved again, and the figure of the mad blood demon emerged from the void. Talk, Su Zimo said. Talk about what? One of the black-cloaked men snorted. You were sent here? By the Supreme Clarity Ancient Sect or the Spring Autumn Sect? I want to know what this thing you mentioned is, Su Zimo asked, frowning. The black-cloaked man looked surprised. He didn't expect Su Zimo to really be unaware. If you really don't know, let us go. Leave here and we won't pursue it. This place is a swamp. The deeper you go, the harder it is to get out. But now I'm curious, Su Zimo replied flatly. Desire will drag you into hell. After saying that, the black-cloaked man instantly lost his life. His body began to rot rapidly. The same thing happened to the other 2 men. Su Zimo frowned slightly as he watched. These men weren't afraid to die. In fact, they had clearly been prepared to. Chapter 333, Immortal Master. It seems this holy river village is hiding a big secret. Su Zimo chuckled lightly, glanced around, and saw no one following him. The heavily rotting corpses had turned to ash in an instant. Not even bones remained. Su Zimo walked back into the village. Late at night, Holy River Village was eerily quiet. All the houses had their lights out, and only a few dead leaves were swept by the autumn wind through the cold night. At the east end of the village, that same house sat in silence, almost unnervingly so. The wild boar wasn't ordinary. The people we sent are all dead? Yes. Should we continue?
No.
Pointless deaths only show my ignorance as the one in charge. Let Tidewatch test him instead. The night passed without words. Su Zimo yawned as he watched the morning sun rise in the east. Under the tree, Gu Muyu had already prepared breakfast, leftover roasted meat and some porridge. During breakfast, Gu's mother asked Su Zimo some basic questions. The main point was really to ask when Su Zimo would be leaving Holy River Village. Mom, are you trying to drive brother away? Gu Muyu asked, unhappy. I didn't mean that. Her mother shook her head. It's just that little Mo must have his own life. He can't stay here with you forever. I'll leave in a few days, Su Zimo said with a smile. After breakfast, Gu Muyu seemed a little down, probably because she was thinking about him leaving. She took the laundry to the river at the village entrance and washed it. She seemed in better spirits when she came back. Brother, they're recruiting disciples outside. It's really lively. Want to check it out? Gu Muyu said to Su Zimo, who was leaning on a tree branch. You're so good with a blade, you'll definitely be chosen. If you join an immortal sect and learn cultivation, your future path will be much better. Recruiting disciples? Su Zimo asked curiously. Yeah, it's the people from the Tidewatch sect. They're the only sect near Holy River Village, Gu Muyu explained. Normally, people have to go to the mountain to seek a master. It's rare for them to come down here themselves. I'm not going. Maybe they'll come find me instead. Su Zimo laughed. This Holy River Village really had some depth to it. By noon, a commotion was heard outside the door. A group of people pushed the door open and came in. Muyu, the leading young man, called out loudly upon entering. Gu Muyu ran out from the house, curious when she saw them. Brother Xiaofeng, what are you doing here? The Immortal Master is recruiting personal disciples in our village. Dozens have already been eliminated, and he hasn't found a satisfactory one yet. The young man named Zhao Feng replied. You said your brother killed a wild boar with one strike. He must be strong. So we recommended him to the immortal master. Really? Gumuyu asked happily. Why would I lie? The immortal master will be here any moment, Zhao Feng said. Where's your brother? Up there. Gumuyu pointed to a nearby tree and shouted at Su Zimo, who was lounging on a branch. Brother, come down. The immortal master's almost here. It'll leave a bad impression if he sees you like that. Standing high helps you see far, Su Zimo said with a laugh and jumped down from the tree. You're Muyu's newly recognized brother? Zhao Feng looked Su Zimo up and down. Doesn't look like much. So unless someone's 10 feet tall and covered in muscles, they're not impressive to you? Su Zimo asked with a smile. As they spoke, a group of people entered from outside the door. Leading them was a middle-aged man in a purple robe with long hair. There was a purple six-pointed mark on his forehead. Wearing a Taoist robe, he looked ethereal and had the demeanor of an immortal. The immortal master from Tidewatch is here. Zhao Feng quickly stepped aside. The crowd grew noisy instantly. Brother. Gumuyu tugged at Su Zimo's sleeve nervously. It's fine. Su Zimo waved and looked directly at the purple-robed man. You must be the immortal master from Tidewatch. He stepped forward and asked. The immortal master looked at Su Zimo with a hint of doubt. This is the young man we mentioned earlier, the one we recommended. His name is Su Zimo, someone explained. The immortal master nodded slightly and asked Su Zimo, You should already know the situation. Would you be willing to become my personal disciple? No. Su Zimo shook his head. He said calmly, There doesn't seem to be any grudge between us. I just don't understand why you people won't leave me alone. I don't understand what you're talking about, the immortal master replied coldly. Fine. Let me put it in a way you'll understand. Su Zimo smiled. I think with your ability, you're not qualified to teach me. As soon as he said that, the place erupted. This guy's full of himself. How dare he challenge the immortal master? We should kick him out of the village. He's not even one of us. The immortal master raised his hand to quiet the crowd. Since you've said so, and the prestige of an immortal master must not be insulted, I have no choice but to subdue you and wait for judgment, he said coldly. You? Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. The immortal master snorted and released the pressure of an Empyrean Meridian Realm cultivator. Light blue spirit force rippled around him as he struck with one palm, the force pressing down heavily. It was clear he wasn't holding back. This little mortal village really is full of surprises. Su Zimo smiled. Clang. The sound of Shadow Tyrant being unsheathed echoed through the sky. Thunder surged across the blade, and Su Zimo didn't retreat. He struck with his blade directly. Boom! Shadow Tyrant slashed through the void, heading straight for the immortal master's palm. At that moment, sensing the sharpness of Su Zimo's blade, the immortal master's expression changed, and he took several steps back, not daring to meet it head-on. Dodging all the time won't work, Su Zimo laughed. He burst forward and slashed again with full power. Seeing he couldn't dodge in time, the immortal master joined his hands together and formed a sky-blue sphere. He released it from his hands, and the sphere quickly expanded, enveloping his entire body. Interesting, Su Zimo chuckled. Shadow Tyrant landed on the sphere, sparks flying everywhere. In that moment, Su Zimo increased his strength, switching from spirit force to the power of creation. The blue sphere shattered instantly. The immortal master's face changed drastically. In a panic, 2 wings suddenly grew from his back, and he quickly flew away. You're from the Shadow Race, Su Zimo said in surprise. Chapter 334 Village Chief at God Meridian Realm. That the immortal master from Tidewatch was from the Shadow Race was something Su Zimo hadn't expected. Just like the celestial race that was exterminated, the Shadow Race had also been wiped out long ago. But the reason for their extinction and the identity of the culprit remain unknown. It was as if, a long time ago, this not too big, not too small clan suddenly vanished from the primordial heartlands. No one had seen members of the shadow race again, and there were no records of them left. Yet today, in this remote mortal village, Su Zimo had encountered someone from a supposedly extinct clan. The wings that sprouted from the back of the immortal master were enormous. Black wings with blood-red patterns covering them. They seemed to be a part of his body. Now with the wings out, his speed increased dramatically, at least 5 times faster than before. Seems you know quite a lot. The immortal master narrowed his eyes and said, after all, the shadow race had vanished for several eras. Many people had forgotten about them or never even heard of them. With so many races in the world, a race that had never produced a grand emperor and stayed relatively low profile was hard to remember. I'm getting more and more curious about what's going on here. Su Zimo smiled. This is a swamp. The more you know, the faster you die. The immortal master replied coldly. He flew overhead, light blue spirit force swirling around him. Then he dove down from above. Still not giving up? Su Zimo shook his head and chuckled. An ant is still just an ant. He drew Shadow Tyrant and unleashed a technique he hadn't used in a long time, sword drawing technique. Brilliant blade light burst forth in front of him. This blade technique emphasized one thing above all: speed. As the blade light intertwined and formed before Su Zimo, the immortal master's 2 pairs of wings were instantly severed. The strike was too fast. Only when the immortal master collapsed to the ground and paused slightly did he feel the gut-wrenching pain surge through his body like numbness. He clutched his back and screamed in agony. Blood sprayed from where his wings had been cut. Su Zimo knew that wouldn't be enough to kill him. The wings of the shadow race were a unique part of their bodies. Even if cut off, they could grow back. I'm especially curious what your shadow race is plotting. Su Zimo walked forward slowly, Shadow Tyrant placed at the immortal master's nose as he asked softly, if you want to kill me, do it. Why so much talk? The immortal master replied coldly. If you wanted to die, you would have already killed yourself. Why waste time talking to me?
Su Zimo chukka.
The 3 black-cloaked assassins from last night were likely also sent by the shadow race. They had self-destructed with massive bodily decay. Su Zimo couldn't stop it in time. Clearly, this immortal master had no intention of dying. Master Su, please show mercy. Just then, an old man hurried over from outside. He wore a green robe and was quite short. His hair at the temples was already gray and white. He looked like a candle burning out, frail and old. Village Chief Shao. Villagers watching nearby greeted the elder quickly. This old man was the chief of Holy River Village. What is it? Su Zimo looked him over and asked. This man must not be killed, Village Chief Shao quickly said. He's from the Tidewatch sect. If he dies in our village, the Tidewatch sect will take all their anger out on us. Hearing this, Su Zimo smiled and said, how much longer do you plan to keep lying? Chief, you're part of the shadow race too, aren't you? Shadow race? I don't know what you're talking about. The chief shook his head. Really? Su Zimo smiled and sent out a palm strike. The old man didn't dodge and took the hit directly. His body was knocked backward and slammed into the courtyard wall. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Seeing this, the surrounding villagers erupted in anger. They all started shouting, what are you doing? We took you in kindly, and now you repay kindness with betrayal. Brother. Gumuyu also looked on anxiously. You're all really good actors. Su Zimo ignored the yelling villagers. They knew how strong Su Zimo was and didn't dare get physically involved, only shouting from the sidelines. He looked at the struggling old man. His tone turned cold. If you keep pretending, then I'll just kill him. Seeing Su Zimo wasn't bluffing, the village chief stayed silent for a moment. Then he said to the villagers, everyone leave. I need to talk to him alone. Though they were reluctant, the villagers all left. Before leaving, Gumuyu looked back at Su Zimo with worry in her clear, beautiful eyes. Once everyone was gone, the village chief chuckled. Looking at Su Zimo with interest, he asked, how did you find out? Find out what? Su Zimo asked. That I'm from the shadow race. You all share similar bloodlines. I can sense it, Suzimo replied calmly. Unfortunately, you know too much, the village chief sighed. Suddenly, the pressure of a God Meridian realm expert burst from his body, and he lunged at Suzimo. Suzimo reacted instantly and quickly backed away. He didn't bother wasting time and summoned chaos. When the overwhelming God Meridian realm aura of chaos spread out, the village chief's face changed drastically. He stared at chaos and said slowly, word by word, "Meridian Beast, I think it's time we had a proper talk," Suzimo said calmly. "What do you want to talk about?" the chief asked after a long silence. "The reason your shadow race is hiding here," Suzimo asked. "We offended some powerful enemies back then and were exterminated. Under the protection of our ancestors, a few of us managed to escape," the village chief said slowly. "We came here, founded a sect and built a village, and have barely survived since." "Then why did you send people to kill me?" Suzimo asked. "I'll answer that one." A soft sigh came from the nearby hut, and Gumuyu's mother slowly walked out, leaning on a cane. "Iran," the village chief murmured. Suzimo looked at Muyu's mother but said nothing, waiting for her to speak. He had long known she wasn't an ordinary person. As she began to tell a story, Suzimo finally understood. Tens of thousands of years ago, after the shadow race was destroyed by powerful enemies, the few survivors fled to this remote area to escape pursuit and hide from the world. Chapter 335, The Shadow Race. They founded a sect here and named it the Tidewatch Sect. The first batch of Shadow Race members settled in this place. Later, as they began to reproduce, the clan grew livelier. So they established Holy River Village beneath the Tidewatch Sect. You could say that the members of the Shadow Race in the Tidewatch Sect all knew their origins and identities. But most people in Holy River Village were the newer generations who knew nothing. They didn't even know they carried the bloodline of the Shadow Race. Every year, the Tidewatch Sect would select talented young people from Holy River Village to join. Only after joining the sect would they be told the truth about their lineage. About 20 years ago, a man arrived at this long-hidden Holy River Village. He claimed he was running from enemies and had discovered the village by accident. The kind-hearted Shadow Race members took him in. Later, a young Gu-Iran, Gumuyu's mother, fell in love with the man. They quickly got together, married, and had a child. Gumuyu was born from that union. So she had only half of the Shadow Race's bloodline. The other half was human. But a few years later, the Shadow Race discovered that the man wasn't who he claimed to be. He had been sent by their enemies to find the remaining members of the Shadow Race. But since the race had hidden so well, the man was unsure if Holy River Village really housed the survivors. So he lived there for decades. Eventually, he discovered the Shadow Race's secret. Before he could report back, he was killed by the Shadow Race. Gumuyu's mother lost her sight in that battle. She had killed the man herself. Since then, the Shadow Race became highly distrustful of all outsiders. That was why they tried to eliminate Suzimo in secret. After hearing Gu's mother's explanation, Suzimo chuckled. He turned to look at village chief Xiao and said, "So this is the secret you were hiding?" "Yes. We hope young Master Su can help us keep it." Chief Xiao nodded and replied, "Our Shadow Race can no longer endure any more trouble." Suzimo glanced at the badly injured Immortal Master from Tidewatch. His blade moved so fast that no one could react. The Immortal Master was instantly sliced in two. Even in death, his face still showed slight shock. No one expected Suzimo to suddenly strike. The smell of blood spread in the air. Chief Xiao looked warily at Chaos, then turned to Suzimo and asked, "What are you doing? Do you think I'm the fool here? Or are you the fools?" Suzimo sneered. The story was well told, but mixed with truth and lies. No sincerity at all. He looked at Muyu's mother and said coldly, "If not for that girl, the one I would have just cut in half would have been you. What do you want?" Chief Xiao asked, face grim. "Simple. Tell me the secret you're guarding," Suzimo said. "You only get one chance. I won't ask again. If your answer doesn't satisfy me, I'll leave without another word. And today I'll slaughter your shadow race and make sure you're truly wiped out. Hearing this, Chief Xiao fell silent for a moment, which only confirmed for Su Zimo that he was still hiding something. I'll count to 3. If you're still silent after that, I won't ask again, Su Zimo said calmly. 3, 2. It's the war god's inheritance item. I'll say it. It's the war god's inheritance item. Chief Xiao quickly said, his expression changing. After he spoke, he let out a long sigh. The real reason we were exterminated was because of the war god's inheritance. What war god's inheritance item? Su Zimo asked. Have you heard of the ruins of divinity? Yes. Su Zimo nodded. You've heard of the war god's story, right? Chief Xiao continued. I have. Then what? Su Zimo replied. The ruins of divinity open once every 1,000 years. Anyone who enters and survives will grow stronger. Some even receive a divine inheritance. Chief Xiao slowly explained. Actually, those gods scattered the items that carry their inheritance across the world. It's said that if you carry their inheritance item into the ruins of divinity, there's a high chance you'll receive their power. I see. So you have the war god's inheritance item. Su Zimo nodded. The war god was known as the strongest deity of the legendary era. It was he who started the battle called God's Fall, which ended the reign of the gods. Since then, all gods vanished from the world. Chief Xiao added, you can imagine how valuable this inheritance is. Valuable enough that you chose extinction over handing it over, Su Zimo said, shaking his head in disbelief. You don't understand. For our shadow race to truly rise and stand out among thousands of races, just having a few more people isn't enough, Chief Xiao said emotionally. We need someone to become a grand emperor, to see the scenery beyond the heavens. Only under the leadership of a grand emperor can our clan grow. So, now that the same choice is in front of you again, would you still choose extinction? Su Zimo asked. What do you mean? Chief Xiao frowned. I mean, I want the war god's inheritance, Su Zimo said, narrowing his eyes with a smile. Will you hand it over, or shall I wipe out your clan? I should have seen this coming, Chief Xiao muttered. Finally, he said, I'll give you the inheritance, but only if you agree to one thing. You want me to kill your enemies? Su Zimo laughed.
No.
You don't have the strength for that yet, Chief Xiao replied. When the ruins of divinity open, help me retrieve something inside. Underestimated, huh? Su Zimo smiled. But that's fine. Saves me some trouble. Well? Chief Xiao asked. No deal, Su Zimo replied. Hand over the inheritance and I'll spare your clan. Anything beyond that, I'm not interested. Then go ahead and wipe us out. Let the inheritance item vanish forever, Chief Xiao said coldly. That's my final bottom line. I'd rather die than give in. Su Zimo studied him for a moment. He knew that the hardest kind of person to deal with was someone who no longer feared death. If someone doesn't fear dying, what else can threaten them? Fine, I agree. Hand it over. Su Zimo nodded. Come with me to the Tidewatch sect. The war god's inheritance is stored there, Chief Xiao said calmly. Then the two of them stepped into the air and flew off into the distance. Chapter 336, Soaring Cloud City. As the only sect near Holy River Village, the Tidewatch sect was considered quite decent. Its ruler was none other than Village Chief Xiao. A sect master at the God Meridian realm was already considered strong. But in the long run, if the strongest person in a clan was only at the God Meridian realm, wasn't that a sign of its decline? When Chief Xiao handed the inheritance item to Su Zimo, he let out a long sigh. It was as if the burden he had carried for so many years had suddenly been lifted. Su Zimo looked at the object in his hand. This so-called war god's inheritance was actually just a small black cylinder. The cylinder was completely pitch black, engraved with ancient characters from the early legendary era. It didn't look particularly eye-catching, but the sense of age from the legendary era could still be felt. Su Zimo put the cylinder away and returned to Holy River Village. It was a farewell of sorts. When Gumuyu heard that Suzimo was leaving, her eyes turned red as she held back tears. Partings are part of life, Suzimo said with a smile. Big brother, when will we meet again? Gumuyu asked, holding onto his sleeve. Do you want to cultivate? Suzimo didn't answer directly, but asked her instead. Cultivate. Gumuyu paused. Then her bright, fairy-like eyes lit up and she nodded hard. Suzimo borrowed brush and ink from the village and wrote down the cultivation technique from his previous life, the Grand Sovereign Freedom Codex. Since he was now walking the path of creation, he no longer needed this technique. Read it secretly and burn it after, Suzimo reminded her. Then if I learn this, will I be able to see you again? Gumuyu asked. When you're strong enough, you'll see me again, Suzimo said with a smile, gently patting her head. Then he turned and slowly disappeared from everyone's sight in Holy River Village. After leaving Holy River Village, Suzimo followed the river downstream. It had been a nice encounter. But now the 6-month deadline he had agreed upon with the Dark Primordial Race was approaching. Suzimo didn't plan to waste any time. After obtaining the 9 Revolutions God Tower physique, he was going to advance into the Empyrean Meridian realm and reach the peak in one go. As he walked out of the long river, the thick forest gradually thinned. The view ahead became more open. Suzimo wasn't sure where in the eastern continent he was. At the end of his vision stood a city. He sped up and approached it. Soaring Cloud City. 3 large characters were engraved on the dark green bricks. The setting sun lit the peaceful city walls in the golden light of dusk. The weather was turning cold. Another year passing by. Suzimo hadn't heard of Soaring Cloud City before. It wasn't a small city, but not large enough to match a city like Primordial Ancient City. Inside, it was decently prosperous. Suzimo found an inn to stay in and casually asked around. He learned that this city was under the rule of the Dan Imperial clan. When the Silent Extinction Ridge had moved, it had taken him from the far west to the core region of the eastern continent. This area was not far from the Buddha burial temple. Suzimo wasn't worried. After dinner, he used his knife to carve a triangular symbol on the table. Then he returned to his room. The sky darkened quickly. Night fell, and a quiet unique to the night howled in silence around him. Some unknown insects chirped wildly in the corners a dozen meters below the inn. Leaning on the windowsill, Suzimo turned his head and looked at the quiet room. You people from the Dark Primordial Race really like to play hide and seek, he said calmly. My lord, I just arrived too. A black shadow suddenly appeared in the room without a sound. He immediately knelt down respectfully before Suzimo. Where's Death God Qin? Suzimo asked. In the Buddha Reverence City, the black-clad man replied quickly. Tell him Suzimo is looking for him, said Suzimo. As his voice faded, the shadow disappeared. The Dark Primordial Race's influence is growing stronger, Suzimo muttered. He had previously asked Death God Qin for a Death God token. According to the Dark Primordial Race's rules, anyone with a Death God token was considered an honored guest. Not just in name, within limits, they could even command the Dark Primordial Race's people to act on their behalf. The Dark Primordial Race had once swept across the 5 continents during the Desolate Era. Though it had declined, its strength was still far beyond that of ordinary imperial lineages. After several eras of rest and recovery, the Dark Primordial Race now seemed poised to rise again. The triangle symbol Suzimo had left on the inn table was the mark of the Death God token. If any of the Dark Primordial Race's people saw it, they would definitely come to find him. With the matter of Death God Qin handled, Suzimo planned to stay in Soaring Cloud City for a few days. Once everything was set and foolproof, he would head to the Buddha burial temple. Why so cautious? In a single sentence, even Grand Emperors had to be careful. Back in the day, Grand Emperor Xueming had gone to the Buddha burial temple to retrieve something. He was trapped there for 7 days before he barely escaped. Since then, he never spoke of the Buddha burial temple again. As one of the 10 forbidden grounds, the Buddha burial temple was both the safest and most dangerous. It was said that as long as you followed the rules inside, you would be fine and might even gain some fortune. But if you broke the rules, you'd be trapped there for life. The night passed without incident. The next morning, Su Zimo came downstairs for breakfast. He was waiting for Death God Qin to arrive in the next few days. Soaring Cloud City wasn't very lively. Apart from travelers, few people ate breakfast at the inn. When Su Zimo walked downstairs, he saw only 2 tables of guests. At one table sat a single youth in a blue robe, holding a folding fan, looking refined and elegant. At the other sat 3 men and 2 women, dressed in short white robes. On their backs was the character Dan. They were likely branch members of the Dan Imperial clan from Soaring Cloud City. At the moment, they were excitedly chatting. This time in the clan competition, I'm definitely going to place well. Brother Dan Qing is the pride of our Soaring Cloud City's Dan Imperial clan. Even when he joins the main clan, he won't be any weaker than those people. One of the youths praised. That's right. Go for it, Brother Dan Qing. A bunch of nobodies, sneered the youth in the blue robe from the other table, clearly unimpressed by their conversation. Chapter 337 Alchemy Like Roasting Beans. What did you just say? One of the young men at the other table slammed the table and stood up after hearing the green-robed youth's words. He glared coldly at him, brows furrowed. Let it go, Dan Yang. The girl beside him tugged at his sleeve, trying to calm him. How can I let it go? Dan Yang replied calmly. This isn't just about Brother Dan Qing's honor. It's an insult to the face of our Soaring Cloud City Dan Imperial clan branch. What? Even trash like you care about saving face? The green-robed youth took a sip of wine, clearly unconcerned. Isn't that going a bit too far? Dan Qing stood up slowly, displeased. You people from the branch family of the Dan Imperial clan aren't much. The green-robed youth shook his head with a smirk. If you're that good, why have I never heard of you before? Dan Yang said with disdain. This time the Dan Imperial clan's main family is holding the Myriad Pills Assembly at the Alchemy Tower. All alchemy geniuses from across the eastern continent will gather there. The green-robed youth said with a smile. And from there, I will rise to fame. Anyone can talk big, Dan Yang sneered. Who's to say Brother Dan Qing couldn't easily outdo you? Ignorance of the weak. The green-robed youth shook his head and chuckled. Want to compete, brother? Dan Qing took a deep breath and calmly asked. I don't mind, the green-robed youth replied. How about we do it at my Dan Imperial clan's pill room? No need, right here is fine, the green-robed youth said, shaking his head. Here? Dan Qing was slightly stunned. For a proper alchemist, the setting is crucial. Every step in alchemy must be precise. A single misstep could ruin the pill. The green-robed youth didn't speak. He waved his right hand. Light purple spirit force gathered around him. In mid-air, the energy intertwined and formed a light purple pill cauldron. Though formed from energy, the cauldron looked lifelike, almost indistinguishable from a real one. Pill aura cauldron condensation, Dan Qing said seriously. This was a high-level alchemy technique. Normal alchemists needed actual pill furnaces to refine pills. But some masters had reached such proficiency that they could form cauldrons from their own spirit force. Only the head of the Soaring Cloud City's Dan Imperial clan and a few elders could do this. No one from the younger generation had achieved it until now. With this one move, the green-robed youth had already widened the gap between them. The green-robed youth then waved his hand again. The cauldron floated in the air, echoing with a hollow sound. A purple flame burst from his palm, slowly heating one side of the cauldron. Then countless herbs flew out from his storage ring. He suspended all the herbs mid-air with his spiritual energy. Once the cauldron was hot enough, he dumped all the liquid essence and herbs in at once. There was no order to it, just everything thrown in like a chaotic stew. The Dan Imperial clan disciples were dumbfounded. What kind of alchemy was this? Alchemy was all about careful sequencing based on the properties of the herbs. No one refines pills like that, Dan Yang said in shock. This is going to be a disaster. That purple flame must be some kind of exotic fire, Dan Qing muttered. It can speed up pill making, but it requires extreme control. As they spoke, the flames under the cauldron burned brighter. A faint medicinal aroma began to waft out. The green-robed youth waved his hand again. The energy cauldron vanished, and the fire wrapped around more than a dozen pills that floated into the air. As the flames faded, the scent of the pills grew stronger. "It's done," Dan Yang said, stunned. "That was barely any time." 6 minutes, Dan Qing said seriously. "A level 5 pill, Heavenly Lotus Detox pill. It even has pill patterns. Perfect grade." The green-robed youth held the pills in his hand, examined them, and spoke slowly. "I don't expect much. If you can make the same pill in the same amount of time, you win." "My pill cauldron is in the pill room," Dan Qing replied. "No need for that. Tell me, even with a cauldron, can you do it?" the green-robed youth asked. Dan Qing was silent, then shook his head. The man's alchemy could only be described one way. Alchemy like roasting beans, done with ease. Seeing Dan Qing's response, the green-robed youth chuckled. He downed his wine and walked out of the inn. "Remember my name, Shuabuyu, the man who will make a name for himself at the Alchemy Tower." Everyone stared in silence at his departing figure. The scene had been too shocking. The difference in skill was obvious. Only Su Zimo smiled quietly nearby. He casually sat down and ordered some dishes. "Why are you laughing, brother?" Dan Qing turned and asked curiously. "Do you know how to perform sleight of hand?" Su Zimo asked. "What do you mean?" Dan Qing replied, confused. "If you do, you could also make pills like roasting beans." Su Zimo smiled. Dan Qing paused, thinking back on everything Shuabuyu had done. That kind of illogical alchemy. Do you really think he could make a perfect level 5 pill with such sloppy steps? Su Zimo smiled. Is he the reincarnated alchemy emperor or something? Dan Qing was suddenly enlightened. Right, of course. From start to finish, it had all been an act. Aside from the impressive cauldron formed from pill aura, everything else seemed off. It was likely the pills were pre-prepared, and the scent was dispersed by some special trick. No wonder he had left in such a hurry. But what was his goal? Dan Qing couldn't figure it out. "Thank you for the guidance." Dan Qing quickly introduced himself and expressed his gratitude. Su Zimo shook his head, unconcerned. He watched the green-robed youth walk away and smiled to himself. "Qi Tianxing, looks like you haven't changed." He didn't expose the man, after all. They were old acquaintances and would probably meet again. After breakfast, the Dan Imperial clan disciples left early. Su Zimo wandered around the city by himself and returned to the inn at dusk. Chapter 338, Mahayana Va Hinayana Buddhism. Just as he returned to his room, Su Zimo saw someone sitting casually on the windowsill. A blood-red robe fluttered slightly in the wind. Death God Qin, wearing a ghost-faced mask, quietly watched Su Zimo. "I've been waiting for you," he said hoarsely. "Didn't expect you to arrive this quickly." Su Zimo smiled in return. "When do we depart?" Death God Qin asked. "We'll leave tomorrow. No rush, as long as we get there within 3 days," Su Zimo replied. "How many powerhouses did your dark primordial race prepare for the trip to the Buddha burial temple this time?" 3 immortal sovereigns, plus me," Death God Qin said calmly. 3 immortal sovereigns, just like that. Looks like the dark primordial race is recovering fast. Su Zimo chuckled. "This is the strongest force I can mobilize. Don't get any ideas," Death God Qin quickly explained. As dawn gradually broke, the once quiet streets started to liven up. The smell of steamed buns drifted up through the window from below. Su Zimo got ready, and with Death God Qin headed south. From soaring Cloud City, they passed through the Dan Imperial clan's territory and entered the lands governed by the Bailey Imperial clan. That's where the Buddha burial temple was located. To most people, the Buddha burial temple was unfamiliar. It stayed hidden, and only a few had ever truly entered it. Only a handful even knew where its entrance was. In recent days, the Dan Imperial clan's territory had become especially lively. The reason was the upcoming Myriad Pills assembly at the Alchemy Tower. The Myriad Pills Assembly was considered the most grand event in the Eastern Continent's core region. At that time, alchemists from all over the Eastern Continent, and even from other continents, would come to visit or participate in the event. It was a tradition started by the Alchemy Emperor after he shouldered the Heaven's Will. It had been going on for tens of thousands of years. Each time, a few outstanding talents emerged and were eventually brought into the Dan Imperial clan. That's why among the imperial lineages of the Eastern Continent, the Dan Imperial clan had the most stable growth, largely thanks to the assembly. Su Zimo wasn't particularly interested in the event. After all, alchemy didn't mean much to him. He and Death God Qin continued on their way to the Buddha burial temple. Su Zimo rode a dark sky tiger, while Death God Qin walked in the air beside him. 2 days later, they arrived at a city called Buddha Reverence City. This city was located beneath Martial Magnificence Mountain and was the most famous in the region. Standing at the city gates, no matter the angle, the entire city resembled a giant Buddha with palms pressed together. To be precise, this was a Buddhist city, a city built by and composed entirely of devotees. It was said that as long as one was a devout believer, they would receive the Buddha's protection in Buddha Reverence City. Su Zimo and Death God Qin walked into the city. Bald monks in robes could be seen everywhere. On both sides of the city's busiest main street, there were stalls selling Buddhist trinkets and daily items. Amitabha was the most commonly used greeting. There were no inns in the city, only Buddhist lodges. Anyone in need who sincerely sought help could receive free lodging from the lodges. The whole city seemed harmonious, with everyone talking about Buddhist teachings, the benefits of spreading Buddhism, and recruiting new followers. Death God Qin explained, "There are no other factions in this city, only devout believers. But there are 2 different ideologies." 2 ideologies? Su Zimo asked curiously. "Mahayana and Hinayana Buddhism," Death God Qin explained flatly. "One emphasizes saving oneself before saving others. The other emphasizes saving others before oneself. People here only argue when their beliefs clash. Their thinking is too narrow." Su Zimo shook his head. "Why not step outside of Buddhism and look at other things? In the end, it's about selflessness," Death God Qin replied. "Buddhism embraces all things." "Then which do you follow?" Su Zimo asked with interest. "I only believe in the strong," Death God Qin replied calmly. "Buddhism can't enlighten me. Let's rest here for the night. We'll head up the mountain tomorrow," Su Zimo said. Death God Qin nodded without objection. The 2 of them found a Buddhist lodge and booked 2 rooms. They also ordered some dinner downstairs. The food was mostly light and vegetarian. While they were eating, a young monk quietly approached with their food. He wore a gray monk robe, his shaved head shiny, with 8 burn scars on top. Looking at Su Zimo and Death God Qin, the young monk asked gently, "You 2 must be from outside the city?" "More or less," Su Zimo nodded. "Then may I ask how much you know about Buddha Reverence City?" the young monk asked with a smile. "Would you be interested in learning about our Mahayana Buddhism?" Su Zimo and Death God Qin exchanged a glance. So he was here to recruit followers. "Can Mahayana Buddhism help me become a grand emperor?" Su Zimo asked with a smile. "Without accumulating small steps, one cannot reach 1,000 miles. Without small streams, there is no ocean," the young monk said calmly, putting his palms together. "Buddhism is a philosophy guiding one's life, not invincibility. But if you are willing to work hard and pursue your goal, I believe when your mind is clear, you will naturally succeed." "You're quite a talker," Su Zimo chuckled. "Thank you for the compliment," the monk said modestly. "Would you consider becoming a lay disciple of Mahayana Buddhism?" "What's so good about Mahayana?" A voice came from the door of the lodge. An old man in a light yellow monk robe slowly walked in. He glanced at Su Zimo and Death God Qin, put his hands together, and softly said, "Amitabha." Then he turned to the young monk and smiled. "Junior brother, are you trying to mislead people again?" "What misleading? Everything is by free will," the young monk replied softly. Are you perhaps envious of Mahayana's popularity? Do you want to come learn its essence? You're too attached. The old monk shook his head. In all things, one must first save oneself before saving others. If you don't understand selflessness, how can you help others? That's why Hinayana is the correct path. Stop clinging to illusions, brother. Watching the two argue, Suzimo shook his head helplessly. This benefactor, how about you judge which of our Buddhist teachings is better? The old monk looked at Suzimo, eyes lighting up with interest. The young monk fell silent for a moment, also looking at Suzimo with anticipation. You two are like this teacup in my hand, Suzimo said. As he spoke, he picked up the kettle and began pouring hot water into the cup. Even after the cup was full and overflowing, he kept pouring, without stopping. Chapter 339, The Ragged Man. Young man, the cup is already full. Why are you still pouring? The old monk asked Suzimo with confusion. I know, Suzimo nodded. Your hearts are like this cup, completely filled with your own thoughts and stubbornness. I have to empty the cup completely before we can even begin to discuss whose Buddhist teaching is better. Upon hearing his words, both monks fell silent. After a long pause, the young monk put his palms together, bowed slightly to Suzimo, and said, I've learned something today. Just then, noise erupted from the street outside the Buddhist lodge. The crowd was in chaos, as if something had happened. The group walked out of the inn and saw a street completely packed with people. Countless onlookers had gathered to watch the commotion. This guy dared to steal in Buddha Reverence City. Beat him to death. Send him to hell with a butcher knife. This is blasphemy against the Buddha. The crowd was outraged and noisy. Suzimo asked around and quickly learned that all this commotion was because someone had stolen something. Maybe theft was a common thing elsewhere, usually ending in a quarrel or compensation. But in Buddha Reverence City it was different. People here believed the Buddha protected their city. Everyone in Buddha Reverence City was supposed to be kind and good. Any greed or wrongdoing here would be condemned by all. Their beliefs were extreme. They didn't preach mercy or repentance. They believed that only by killing all evil people could the world be filled with good ones. So anyone who violated the city's core values was met with the blade. From a broader view, this mindset was twisted and unrealistic. Those who fight monsters should beware of becoming monsters themselves. But from the perspective of a single city, it was exactly this belief that kept Buddha Reverence City peaceful. People didn't steal or do anything against the city's core beliefs, because even the smallest mistake would be severely punished. Suzimo and the others squeezed through the crowd and looked toward the center. There, a man in ragged clothes clutched 2 stolen meat buns, shivering and curled up under the judgment of the crowd. He didn't say a word, too scared to argue back. It's him, the young monk muttered. You know him? Suzimo asked curiously. Near Buddha Reverence City there's a sect called Duskblade Sect. It's an insignificant one, but their swordsmanship is impressive, the monk explained. I used to visit them often to spread Mahayana Buddhism and got to know their sect leader. I've seen this young man a few times. He was once the most talented disciple of the Duskblade Sect. So how did he end up like this? Suzimo asked. Later, Duskblade Sect was destroyed. They were said to have obtained an ancient divine sword, the monk said. Whether that's true or not is unclear. The sect was wiped out, and he was captured and tortured but revealed nothing. His enemies didn't dare kill him for fear of losing the sword's whereabouts, so they let him go. Since then, he's been like this, mentally unstable. Young master, I sense the aura of the true God's sword from him. Qingling's voice sounded in Suzimo's mind. A shard of the true God's sword? Suzimo frowned slightly. Things were getting interesting. He hadn't planned to get involved. Suzimo stepped into the crowd and looked at the trembling man. Then he turned to the people and said, Excuse me, everyone. This is my older brother. His mind isn't right. I wasn't watching him properly, and he wandered off. Please, forgive him. He truly has a kind heart. Kind or not, all I know is he stole my buns. A bald, burly man stepped out from the crowd. He was wearing a light blue monk robe and looked rather fierce. "We're willing to compensate," Suzimo said with a smile. "How will you compensate?" the man asked. "Name your price." "We'll pay whatever you think is fair," Suzimo replied. The man's eyes lit up and he said, "I won't kill him, but to teach him a painful lesson, you'll have to pay 100 times the value of those buns." "No problem," Suzimo smiled. With a wave of his hand, a huge pile of spirit stones appeared. "Count them if you'd like," Suzimo said. "No need, no need." The burly monk waved his hand, grinning as he quickly loaded the stones into his storage ring. "All right, let's go," Suzimo said to the terrified man and turned to leave. The man stood still for a moment, then quietly followed behind Suzimo. Suzimo ignored the big man still counting his stones. As they walked out of the crowd, Suzimo patted Death God Qin on the shoulder and said calmly, "I don't want him to see tomorrow's sunrise." Death God Qin nodded and replied in a raspy voice, "Understood." Back at the Buddhist lodge, Suzimo had the young monk prepare a private room and clean clothes for the ragged man. During dinner, Suzimo looked at the man, who was devouring the food, and asked with a smile, "What's your name?" The man ignored him, just kept eating like a madman. Occasionally he'd look up and give Suzimo a silly smile. "You're doing this for the so-called divine sword too?" Death God Qin asked helplessly. "Is that a problem?" Suzimo replied, "You believe those outside rumors?" Death God Qin shook his head. "And you, a crown prince of an imperial lineage, since when do you lack a sword? That saber on your back is pretty good." Suzimo just smiled and didn't answer. As night fell and dinner ended, everyone returned to their rooms. The flickering candlelight slowly dimmed, and the room grew so quiet you could hear a heartbeat. The madman lay on the bed, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness, silently thinking. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew in and opened the window. The man's expression changed. He quickly got out of bed and shut it. He walked over to the table, lit the last bit of candle wax and seemed to calm down slightly. Just as he turned to sit back down, a chill ran through his entire body. Chapter 340, The Real Culprit. A man in black robes was sitting directly across from him. No one knew when he appeared. There was no sound, yet there he was. His entire body was cloaked in black, with only his dark, gloomy eyes visible. "I knew you'd come sooner or later," the ragged man said calmly. "Since you didn't expose me earlier today, I won't kill you," the black-robed man replied. "Then why are you here?" "Just to remind you," the black-robed man said. "Your sex uncle master and master are still in my hands. If you don't want them dead, you'd better behave." "I know," the ragged man replied calmly, though a flash of killing intent passed through his eyes. "My patience is running thin," said the black-robed man coldly. "Hand over the fragment of the true God sword, and I'll release your sect members. It'll benefit both sides." "You think I don't know?" the ragged man replied flatly. "If we don't have the fragment, we might survive. But if you get it, there's no point in us staying alive." The black-robed man went silent for a moment, then said, "Suit yourself. It won't be long before the fragment is mine anyway." As his words fell, the room fell silent. Just as he turned to leave, his body froze. On the windowsill, someone was reclining. No one had noticed him, but he'd heard everything. "All done talking?" Suzimo asked with a smile. "When did you get here?" the black-robed man asked, his voice steady. He hadn't sensed him at all earlier. "I heard everything. What I should and shouldn't hear," Suzimo smiled. Then he turned to the ragged man. "Why aren't you pretending to be insane anymore? I saved you, and you deceived me. How heartbreaking." The black-robed man's eyes narrowed. He turned to flee through the front door. But as he pushed it open, Death God Qin was already standing there calmly. "No escape," Suzimo said, smiling. "Take off the mask. Let me see who you are. I think we've met before." "That depends on whether you've got the skill," the man sneered. A powerful aura surged from his body, peak Empyrean Meridian realm. He charged at Suzimo with a punch filled with fierce energy. "How foolish," Suzimo said flatly. He sidestepped the punch, grabbed the attacker's wrist, and broke it with a twist. Then he kicked him hard in the abdomen, sending him flying. It was only a few simple moves, but Suzimo used full force. The black-robed man hit the ground hard. All his limbs were broken, blood dripping from his mouth. He lay there like a pile of mud. But his spirit force was already healing his injuries. He'd recover before long. Suzimo walked up and tore off his mask. "I'm not surprised," he said with a chuckle. "It was the young monk from earlier." "So the enemy who destroyed Duskblade sect was you?" Suzimo smiled. The monk sighed and said softly, "One wrong step leads to many. Let's make a deal." Suzimo turned to the ragged man. "The sword fragment for the lives of your sect. You're no different from him. Why should I trust you?" The man replied. "You don't have a choice," Suzimo said. "I'm not very patient. If you refuse, I'll just soul search you." At the mention of soul search, the ragged man's eyes narrowed. He could tell Suzimo wasn't ordinary. Not many people could perform soul searching. It was a cruel method. At best, the victim went insane. At worst, they died. Even within true martial sacred ground, soul searching was rarely used because it was unnatural. "I'll make the deal," the ragged man finally said after some thought. "That's better," Suzimo smiled. "I only want the sword fragment. I've got no grudge against Duskblade sect." Then he looked back at the young monk. "Want to live? I understand. I'll take you to where they're held," the monk said, accepting his fate. He led them to a room inside the Buddhist lodge. He knocked on one side of the wall. A rumbling came from beneath their feet. A staircase to the underground appeared. The monk led the way down the dark passage, with the others following close behind. The tunnel wasn't completely dark. Night pearls were embedded in the walls. Footsteps echoed clearly as they walked. At the bottom, the space opened up. A strong stench filled the air. As the stone gate ahead opened, everyone was stunned by what they saw. A giant iron cage where people were chained like animals. Dim yellow lights flickered on both sides. A rough count revealed nearly 100 people inside. All looked thin and lifeless, clearly tortured. The stench came from the fact that everything, eating, drinking, defecating, happened in this cage. The ragged man was frozen in place. "Master! Uncle Master!" he screamed, running toward the cage. The people inside looked at him blankly, their eyes devoid of emotion. Just then, another loud boom echoed above. The monk's figure disappeared, and iron bars fell from all sides, trapping Suzimo and the others inside. The entire secret room was, in fact, a hidden cage. Clapping came from the side. The monk stepped out from the shadows, looking smug. "Surprised?" he laughed. "I wasn't going to spare you anyway," Suzimo said calmly. "But now you've really pissed me off." He glanced around. The cage wasn't made of ordinary material. It was forged from a rare mineral called Heavenbear Earthfiend Stone. Extremely tough, even a God Meridian cultivator couldn't break it easily. "Seems you were well prepared," Suzimo said, narrowing his eyes.